Jewish ethos remained strong. They remain Mitsuyan, unique and exceptional. Fast forward about 3,000 years later, the Pilgrims saw their fleeing England as a type of exodus from Egypt, and their settlement of the Americas as entering the Promised Land. In 1620, their leader, William Bradford, while in a boat over the Atlantic Ocean, said that their journey was as vital as Moses and the Israelites when they went out of Egypt. And when they finally arrived in Cape Cod, he thanked God for letting them pass through their fiery Red Sea. It went in so far as the early settlers referring to Plymouth colony as Little Israel, while Bradford, who became its governor, went by the moniker Moses. The idea that America was a new Israel was not lost on our founders either. In revolutionary times, it was used often. In January of 1776, the pamphleteer Thomas Paine described King George in his Common Sense as the sullen and tempered Pharaoh of England. On August 20th, 1776, Benjamin Franklin, appointed by the Continental Congress along with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, just moments after adopting the Declaration of Independence, proposed the seal of our new country depict Moses standing on the shore and extending his hand over the sea, thereby causing the same to overwhelm Pharaoh, who is sitting in an open chariot. Jefferson suggested a different Exodus scene. He suggested the children of Israel in the wilderness, led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And this continues even after the War of Independence. On March 4th, 1805, in his second inaugural address, President Thomas Jefferson said,
Hi, I'm Bruce Schlesman, broadcasting live from Judicial Watch headquarters. Thanks for tuning in to Judicial Watch. We will be bringing you live coverage of CPAC 2019 at the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center in National Harbor, Maryland. On behalf of Judicial Watch, I want to welcome you to our live stream. CPAC brings together thousands of grassroots activists, leading conservative thinkers, and our nation's leaders to share ideas and learn from each other. Coming up on its 25th anniversary this year, Judicial Watch is a constitutionally conservative, nonpartisan, educational foundation that promotes transparency, accountability, and integrity in our government, politics, and law. JW is the most active Freedom of Information Act requester and litigator operating today. You can join the millions of Judicial Watch followers at Judicial Watch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. First thing this morning, we're going to be cutting live to a conversation with Tom Fitton and Representative Devin Nunes, and that'll be moderated by Byron York from the Washington Examiner. Immediately following that speech, we're going to go to A Line in the Sand, a debate on America's role in Syria, and the moderator is Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, and Buck Sexton from the Buck Sexton Show and Mark Thiessen from American Enterprise Institute, AEI, will be two of the panelists on that panel discussing America's role in Syria, the most recent decisions with that. That'll be an invigorating interview, I'm sure, and we're probably going to learn a lot from it. Lisa Daftari especially is a huge expert in Mideast foreign affairs. After that, we're going to go to a conversation with Kellyanne Conway and Jerome Adams. Dr. Jerome Adams is the U.S. Surgeon General, and the Honorable Kelly Conway is obviously from the White House, and they will be interviewed by Scott Walter from Capital Research Center. After that, Ted Cruz will be discussing the border crisis with Rich Lowry from National Review, and obviously Senator Cruz is quite apt on that. He's a senator from Texas, which is a border state. He most recently put up legislation to fund the wall using cartel money, specifically the money confiscated from El Chapo, who it's named after. Following those conversations, we're going to go at 9:45 and 10 a.m. We're going to go to what I guess that hasn't been announced, but a lot of people are assuming it's President Trump and Mike Pence. They'll be speaking in that hour, and from then we're going to be cutting to Brian Wilson, who will be bringing you exclusive interviews and coverage of Judicial Watch and our organization and the topics of today and the topics that Judicial Watch is into. And we're going to be bringing you not only Judicial Watch lawyers and special guests, we're going to be bringing you interviews from people like Lisa Daftari, some people in Congress, experts from around the world that we're going to be able to have right here to talk about issues that Judicial Watch is doing, like Hillary Clinton, like the Strzok case, like Andrew McCabe. So we're going to be able to bring you that coverage, so please stay tuned for that after these row of panels and speeches that'll be coming your way from CPAC.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Their 2020 platform sounds identical to policies already tried and now failing in the collapsed socialist state of Venezuela.
You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
Abolish ICE. It's a growing call from Democrats to get rid of the agency that arrests and removes illegal immigrants in the U.S.
I think we should get rid of ICE.
We need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Why is it good for us to pay for the health care bills of people who snuck in here against our law?
It's good for people who are in our country, who are contributing to this country's success.
Or did it also apply to, I don't know, gang members or vagrants? I think they were covered too, weren't they?
These hot-button issues like free college, free healthcare, once thought to be radical, appear to be the starting line in this Democratic primary.
The three core demands of the National Day of Action are free public college, a cancellation of student debt, and a $15 an hour minimum wage for people who work on the campus.
And how's that going to be paid?
Great question. I mean, you know, so...
Do you call yourself a radical?
Yeah, you know, if that's what radical means, call me a radical.
Nancy Pelosi, do you recognize her as the leader for the House Democrats?
Of course.
We, as you are aware, we are diligent.
I think one way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy. So please, bring on the recession. Sorry if that hurts people.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, you get out and you tell them they're not welcome.
When they go low, we kick them.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar under attack for anti-Semitic tweets.
Can you respond to that?
No, thank you.
You used the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that? I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing. I am not the expert.
They are the future face of the Democratic Party. They are not only anti-Israel, but often that anti-Zionism morphs into anti-Semitism.
Either the Klansman or the guy in blackface is right now the Democratic governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam.
Northam's nickname was a racial slur.
They called me Coon Man. I did participate in a dance contest in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume. I actually won the contest because I had learned how to do the moonwalk.
Appropriate circumstances.
My wife says inappropriate circumstances.
Tonight!
Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts with a DNA test to prove her Native American ancestry.
Her DNA test claiming she's part Native American appears to be backfiring.
Tonight, the leaders of the Cherokee Nation are speaking out against Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign video touting her Native American ancestry.
Have you considered dropping out of the race?
You're talking about zero carbon emissions, no use of fossil fuels within 12 years.
That is the goal. It's ambitious. And
how is that possible? You're talking about everybody having to drive an electric car?
Admitting in earlier drafts that, quote, we aren't sure that we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows and airplanes that fast.
I really don't like their policy of taking away your car, of taking away your airplane flights, of let's hop a train. You're not allowed to own cows anymore. You know, there are a lot of problems.
It was stunning how quickly some Democrats jumped on this proposal.
We need to be bold. Oh, it's impractical. Oh, it's too expensive.
Keeping track of Democrats who might be driving a hard left, and a lot of them happy to do so.
Socialism is apparently becoming mainstream.
America will never be a socialist country. Never. We're born free, we will live free, and we will die free.
This has been a great movement. They try like hell. They cannot stand what we've done. But we're doing the right thing. And I will never, ever, ever let you down.
We will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Blaze TV, Glenn Beck.
Good morning, CPAC. Good morning. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much, Matt Schlapp and CPAC, for inviting me to speak. If socialism were a movie, socialism would be Friday the 13th, because it seems to always stalk college co-eds who all think that the death and violence is just a scary story that never happened, and they are so convinced that it will never happen to them that they mock the old person who, the one person in town who saw it firsthand, they call him crazy, a nut who still believes in ghost stories. And then they're all dead. And then Jason, his body disappears. And only the old guy who saw it coming saw that the body is gone. And we have sequel after sequel. It happens time and again in movie theater after movie theater and country after country. Make no mistake, stop trying to hook up in some cabin in the woods and prepare, because Jason is coming. He's right behind you, and this time he's coming with a hammer and a sickle. A lot of people think that democratic socialism is just a new coat of paint on the old FDR democratic policies. But let me give you a quote from a Vox column. The title, Democratic Socialism Explained by a Democratic Socialist. The author writes, quote, "There's truth in the long run. Democratic socialists want to end capitalism." Ma'am, we've traced the call. It's coming from inside the House and the Senate. From the column, quote, "Many observers see groups like DSA pushing for policies like Medicare for all and decide that we must actually be something like New Deal liberals who are simply confused about the meaning of socialism. But that's not true. Medicare for all is an instructive example. Medicare for all is not socialism. That would just only nationalize the insurance, not the whole healthcare system. But democratic socialists, still quoting, ultimately want something more like the British National Health Service. So why aren't they going for that? Well, we could ask ourselves, why weren't they going for Medicare for all when we were talking about Obamacare? Again, quoting, because we currently don't have the support to push for and win such an ambitious program. Social democratic reforms like Medicare for all, in the eyes of DSA, part of the long, uneven process of building that support and eventually overthrowing capitalism, end quote. This is the philosophy of the candidates the Democrats are now saying are the future of the party and the future of America. Today, we must dismiss two fallacies. The first one is that capitalism doesn't work. The second is that socialism doesn't work. Let me be the first to tell you that socialism does indeed work. In fact, it works perfectly as designed every single time. We have been having this debate for 170 years now. We look at socialism and say, look, it doesn't work. Look at all the poor and the starving people. Look at all of the piles of dead bodies. And they say, capitalism doesn't work. Look at all the fat rich people. Look at all of the inequality. Well, yes, we have to look at the goals of both. The goal of socialism is equality for all, the equality of outcome. So the goal of socialism is that, then the goal of capitalism being the opposite must be the opposite, inequality of outcome. Yes, the precise and natural result of the free market. Capitalism is the inequality of outcomes. Or to put it another way, capitalism acknowledges and encourages merit. You cannot have merit without inequality. If you want to get rid of inequality, you must first get rid of merit. But capitalism safeguards the promise and hope of inequality. This is why we all studied in school, why we worked so hard to get an A. Because we knew if we had an A, even if others had a D or an F, what it meant for us was the promise of bettering our own lives and our own prospects. It's why we worked hard. It's why many of us get up every morning, why we strive to create or invent, not just to better our world, but to better ourselves and our station. That is the promise and the hope of inequality. With socialism, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how inventive you are. Everyone and everything is equally miserable. In a free market society, there can never be equality, and that's okay. By okay, what I mean is it's the greatest system ever to be devised by man, to lift entire continents out of equal misery and poverty. Capitalism has made the world, yes, more unequal, but we've done it by lifting billions of people out of poverty. And yet, there still remains a pocket of people who are miserable because the free market hasn't gotten there yet, but it will. But while there are people in misery, the rate of children dying because of capitalism, children dying before the age of 5, has dropped by over half. Yet, 70% of the people believe that health care and poverty has gotten worse. Why is that? Well, for one, cable news will obsess over a plane crash for months. But just the life-saving improvement of life before the age of 5 that has been made since 1990 is the equivalent of averting 27 major plane crashes full of children every single day. After a shooting, we all hear how the media will say guns are the problem, but the lives saved due to just a few improvements made in medicine in the last decade alone is the equivalent of erasing every gun murderer, every gun-related death, for over 630 years. And yet you never hear about it. All we hear about is how capitalism is causing inequality. You hear it's fewer people suffering and dying than ever before, not on television. There are still more to save. But while socialism is making everyone except the elites in Venezuela equally starving and desperate, the free market is busy quietly bringing clean water and electricity to the remotest and poorest parts of the world. We've been having the wrong debate. We've let them control and frame this discussion and cast shame on capitalism by pointing at inequality. They're judging a system that has flaws but works by comparing it to a system that has never worked and never existed. It is all because at some point the left has come to believe the great myth about us and our species. To them, mankind is a virus. To them, masculinity is toxic and femininity is weakness. To them, the world is perfect if we could just get rid of man. And it all comes from the inescapable reality of our free market. The one thing that is absolute proof of our depravity, the inequality of outcomes. But the promise of fluid inequality is why people came to America in the first place. We didn't come here to escape from the rich. We came here to escape the system that doomed us to poverty and our children to poverty. It is the recognition that inequality is a fact of nature, but through merit and equal justice, you can change your status and create a better future for your children. They say they seek equality because it would be more fair, but here is the truth. The trick of the language that has been used now for 2 centuries. Socialism is about equality, but it is not about fairness. Capitalism is not about equality, but fairness and justice are its objectives. When it comes to economics, equality and fairness are not synonyms. The stated goal of socialism is to achieve equality for all. The true goal of capitalism is to achieve liberty and justice for all. And that is why the left doesn't like our Pledge of Allegiance, that and God. It is an observable truth that equality does not exist in nature. It doesn't exist in beehives and roses or tails of peacocks. And equality does not exist in man. If you don't believe me, go ahead. Challenge LeBron James to a game of one-on-one. Challenge Kasparov to a game of chess. Challenge Ben Shapiro to debate anything. Equality is not our natural state. One incredible, awesome thing about each of us is that we're all unique individuals endowed by a creator with our own set of superpowers, skills, and talents. We all have our own weaknesses and challenges, and thank God, or this would be a very boring world. You were blessed to be born in America, where we all have the opportunity to first lift ourselves out of misery and poverty and then voluntarily help the rest of the world. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with your desire to achieve, your desire to work hard, to compete, and yes, to win. There is nothing wrong with your expectation to be rewarded for your work and then to enjoy those rewards as you see fit, which of course may include helping the less fortunate. You are the only one that has the power to write your own story. Your destiny is your journey to make. Here is the truth that made America great. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and in plain English, property. No matter no matter what government edicts are passed by any government, that cannot be taken away from you. It cannot be taken away by fascist, authoritarians, socialist, and yes, even democratic socialist. For slavery by majority vote is still slavery. You are the only one that can take away your rights through poor choices. And even then, you have the right of redemption, to begin again, to pull yourself out of the mud and reach again for the heavens. Capitalism, yes, it does have its flaws, especially now that it has lost its moorings. The free market and justice must always be blindfolded. Being black or poor, white, rich, left, right, it should neither save you nor condemn you. Judge me by the content of my character, not the color of my skin or the color of my hat. We're Americans. We are Americans, and we will change the world for the better once again. When we look to a bright future and recognize that it is precisely the system of inequality of outcomes coupled with individual compassion and empathy that made America great. And it is still the conservative movement's embrace of our human nature and an economic system that incentivizes achievement that makes us great. Ours is a system that respects human liberty and ingenuity. Ours is the system that generates prosperity for mankind. Socialism aims to make mankind what we are not and can never be. It works to achieve a state of being that doesn't exist in the natural world, and it does it the only way it can, the only way it ever does, by making us all equally enslaved, equally poor, and all equally dead. We are Americans, but with all humility and without any more hesitation, we must stand up and declare that we are conservatives in the tradition of Washington and Lincoln and Reagan, and we must stand for the Bill of Rights, which grants each of us liberty. We must stand for the rich and for the poor. We will stand for those who have always been here and those ancestors that came on the Mayflower. And we will stand for those who are coming here legally today. Their hopes are our hopes. Their success is our success. And it will come because we stand for blind and equal justice. And we stand for the glorious promise of the natural inequality of outcomes for mankind. God bless.
Minorities have been used in this country, and all of that changes today. We figured out that the left is using us to secure votes and to keep themselves in power and to keep themselves rich.
The mission of conservative values will resonate with people who are here and inspire them.
We hit the home run when we were born and raised in America. There are 7 billion people in the world. The majority of them would trade places with us if only they could.
My country tears of thee, sweet land of liberty of thee I sing.
Minorities do not belong to the left. We belong to nobody but ourselves and God.
No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied.
We are separating ourselves from the victim narrative.
The Democratic Party has been able to tell and dictate for too long who we are.
It's a mentality that you don't have to think a certain way just because you look a certain way.
It is not racism that is keeping us out of the American dream. It's the lies that we've been told.
We have to put this to a stop, and we have a president that's willing to do it.
They are trying to turn us into single-issue voters, and they will never take our vote. This is our official Declaration of Independence from the left. This is the beginning of the revolution, and we are going to save America.
To remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director of Communications at Turning Point USA and founder of the Blexit movement, Candace Owen.
Thank you, guys. It's such an honor to be here. Really, truly it is. There's so many places that I could start here, and I think it really starts at the beginning. 2 years ago, I thought that the left championed minority voices. I thought that the left championed women and always wanted to give us a platform. And then I publicly declared myself a conservative, and I found out the hard way that that's not exactly true. If you're a minority in this country and you don't subscribe to your emotions, if you want to have intellectual discussions and you want to have a debate, there's no place for you on the left. In fact, you will be rejected. In fact, they will actively try to destroy you in the way that they have tried to destroy me over the last 2 years. Many of you guys have followed my political transformation. Obviously, it started on YouTube with just an idea that maybe conservative principles might be an alternative for the Black community. I questioned at the time, is it really possible that a man that was loved by the media, Donald J. Trump, they loved him, loved by Black America. Every hip hop song that I listened to growing up, they wanted to be like Trump. Beyonce and Jay-Z were sipping poolside at Mar-a-Lago. He was the dream. Obama said that the American dream is to be like Trump. Was it really possible that within 24 hours of declaring his candidacy for the White House, he became a racist, bigoted, homophobic, sexist, rapist at one point, right? Was that really possible? And I said, of course, no, it's not possible. There's absolutely no way that that's possible. And then I started asking myself some other questions. How on earth is it possible that a party that instituted slavery, Jim Crow laws, racial terrorism, and the KKK has the Black vote? How is it possible? We gave up culture. The right gave up culture. That's how it's possible. That's how the left was able to do this. We gave up culture. Over the course of the last 50 and 60 years, it seems that we've given up influencing pop culture altogether on the right. And to a certain degree, that's completely understandable. I mean, there isn't a climate that's more hostile to conservative principles than the entertainment industry. We see that everywhere. We see that when Joy Behar mocks the vice president for being faithful to his wife. Was that what he did? She mocks the vice president for saying that he loves Jesus Christ. Was that what he did? You certainly aren't going to win any accolades in Hollywood if you write a script and the protagonist is a part of the nuclear family unit. In fact, you'll probably be chased out of Hollywood if you start to perpetuate conservative principles. That's because the left has invested, they've infected, and they've infested culture at every single layer. This is why Kamala Harris, who will never, ever be president of the United States, is talking about Tupac and Biggie music that never came out, which she claims she smoked marijuana to in college, because she thinks that Black people are stupid, and the way that she's going to appeal to us is just by saying, I smoke pot and I listen to hip hop music. How insulting is that? This is why Hillary Clinton, who is still not the president of the United States, love that, right? It's great. This is why she offered my community hot sauce, if you guys remember. Hot sauce as a reason to vote for her. She offered us hot sauce, a Jay-Z, and a Beyonce concert. She never talked to us about policies. The left never talks about policies because their policies have failed Black America for the last 60 years. The truth is that the left and the Democrats never, ever, ever, ever want to fix Black America because they stump on our issues year after year. If they fixed our issues, they would have nothing to stump on or to talk about. They wouldn't be able to just continually keep calling the other side racist. They want Black America to stay broken. They don't want us to ever have opportunities. They want to continue to give us handouts and not hand-ups. Never in a million years did the left predict Donald J. Trump, and I'll tell you what they also are not predicting. They never predicted a minority awakening. They never thought that they could ever lose the Black vote, ever. They've taken our vote for granted for so long. But things are starting to change, and they're starting to change because, and I'll tell you guys what the magic secret is. I'll tell you how I've been able to transform so many hearts and minds in the minority community. The secret is that I simply tell them the truth. The truth is on our side as conservatives. Truth number one, America is not a racist country. The people that continue to tell us that have a vested interest in racism. In fact, they're actively now importing Nigerians to come do racist acts in this country, a la Jussie Smollett, right? This is MAGA country. No, this is your prison cell, and I hope you rot in it, Jussie. Truth number two, abortion is murder. I ask myself all the time, doesn't it seem to you that progressive policies always lead to regressive results in the Black community? It's amazing, isn't it? Abortion, so progressive. They want to move that forward. We need abortion. We have Black women representing 6 to 7% of the population, and yet we account for almost 40% of all of the abortions that are performed in this country. We have a sick and twisted Governor Andrew Cuomo celebrating that you can rip fetuses, you can rip infants and babies from their mother's womb at 9 months. 9 months. It's absolutely sickening what we're talking about here. And who is that going to impact the most? In New York City, for those of you that don't know, more Black babies are aborted than born live. A hard-hitting truth is that the most unsafe place for a Black child is not on the streets, it's not when they see a police officer, it's in their mother's womb. More than half of the Black population would be double today if it wasn't for abortion. We've lost 18 million Black babies since 1973. How's that for a progressive policy? Is that what they're celebrating? The left needs God. Truth number three, racially motivated police brutality is a myth. It's simply a myth. But father absence is not. The number one issue facing Black America is that fathers have been removed from the home. It's that they have been incentivizing father absence. When the single motherhood rate jumps from 23% in the 1960s to a whopping 74% today, we have a problem. It's a problem that the left does not want to talk about. It is the destruction and the breakdown of the family. Truth number four. There are 3.6 million Black children living below the poverty line. There are 4 million Hispanic children that live below the poverty line. And yet Democrats want us to put illegals first. I say no thank you. I say build the wall. It's actually incomprehensible what has happened to the black community over the last 60 years. I say, I don't want a Green New Deal, I want a Black New Deal. And the good news, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that that actually can be free. It doesn't cost $93 trillion. First and foremost, stop selling us our own oppression. Stop taking away our self-confidence by telling us that we can't because of racism, because of slavery. I've never been a slave in this country. Stop telling us that we need to be obsessing over our past when we should be obsessing over our future and the potential that we have. Stop having a culture which tells us that we should want to be hip-hop artists and basketball players when we should want to be doctors and lawyers. We need to stop idolizing people like LeBron James and start idolizing people like Dr. Condoleezza Rice and Dr. Ben Carson. How about give us school choice? That would be nice. Stop murdering our offspring. The theme today is what makes America great, and I'll tell you the answer. It's our philosophy. Margaret Thatcher said it best. Europe was created by history. America was created by a philosophy. Our philosophy, so perfectly laid out for us by Thomas Paine ahead of the Revolutionary War, is common sense and freedom. It was common sense then that the colonies shouldn't have been governed by the British monarchy. It was time for an American exit. It's common sense today that the Black community and the Hispanic community should not be governed by liberal ideology. It's time for a Blexit. It's common sense that the left does not care about racism, they don't care about sexism, they don't care about misogyny, they don't care about any of that stuff, they don't care about sexism. What they care about is the politicking of fear. When the left results to calling me, as I have read it, a racist, a sexist, a Nazi, because I really have the look going for me. And the words have completely lost their meaning. They have no arguments anymore. It's common sense to me that conservatives need to start invading culture, because we are the party that believes first and foremost in God. And in case you guys forgot, it was our belief in God and in Judeo-Christian values that inspired culture in the first place. Florence is arguably one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's dripping with some of the greatest masterpieces from the Renaissance. It was an explosion of art, of design, of aesthetic sensibility, and almost 100% inspired by God, Christianity, and the church. Conservatives, we are culture. We can invade culture. We can inspire and touch communities. Conservative principles can inspire great works of art and great movements. But we have to give in. We have to say that we are going to fight the cultural war. When I first started on YouTube to hold the mirror up to ourselves and the things that we do wrong, I was mocked by the left and the right. I was told that there was no place for humor, that I couldn't make YouTube videos that were a flash in the pan, that we had to be more stern, more serious, more austere, and that's incorrect. We have to meet people where they're at. We have to be funny. We have to be satirical. Doing billboards about AOC is great. She's giving us a lot of content right now. I want to wrap this up by pleading with all of you to realize that the left is terrified right now because it takes just 5%. If we move the Black vote 5%, the path of least resistance to defeating the left is awakening the minority community, awakening Black America. We've been lied to, we've been abused, we have been used, and we are suffering. If we make an effort ahead of 2020 to embrace the Black community, to embrace culture, we can save this country. I want to thank Matt Schlapp for this amazing opportunity to stand on the stage. I want to thank all of you for hanging in. I know it has been a tough year being a fan of Candace Owens, constantly fighting, constantly punching back, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the grace of God, without your support, without your comments that helped me lift my head when it's been a bad day. I want to thank Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, the greatest student organization. And above all else, just to thank God, because a year and a half ago, I was on YouTube. And what makes America great is how quickly your life can transform if you stop viewing yourself as a victim and start viewing yourself as a victor and a piece of the American dream. God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a conversation with Representative Devin Nunes and Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, hosted by Washington Examiner's Byron York.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to talk today a bit about the Russia investigation. And you know, there have always been two Russia investigations. There's the one that is searching for that most elusive of creatures, collusion. And it's run by the special counsel, Robert Mueller, and the Justice Department and the Senate Intelligence Committee. And we hear about it 24/7. It's on everywhere in the news. But then there is a second Russia investigation, and that is the one looking into what the United States government, what its intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies did in targeting a presidential campaign in 2016. And we have here two men who have played key roles in looking into that. Representative Devin Nunes of California, and Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Oh, a lot of Fitton fans out there. So, Representative Nunes, we're going to start with you. You were basically the person who invented this investigation. You started it, and you've seen it through to a number of revelations. And I'm going to ask you an open-ended question. Where do you think it stands now? Your committee spent yesterday questioning Michael Cohen behind closed doors. Yeah. And I want to ask you where you think things are going now.
Well, from the very beginning of this investigation, it was a narrative. It was a narrative that was created to first go after a presidential campaign and be kind of an October surprise. That's really what it was about. So it was the Clinton campaign with their dirty ops. And then, sadly, what we discovered is they fed that into the FBI, and then it was used against a presidential campaign and then now a sitting administration. So you have to look at everything as almost like a movie script, like a fictional movie script. So you brought up yesterday. So yesterday we had the president's former lawyer in, not for the first time, it was the second time. He already came in behind closed doors. He was already busted for lying to Congress. But what you saw yesterday, it was behind closed doors, Byron. And why was it behind closed doors? Because they want it to be secret, so that then they can run out and they can talk to all the mainstream media who are in search of that ever-elusive collusion, conspiracy, obstruction animal.
I want to be clear. You held it, because the chairman decided to, in this secret room called a SCIF, where you can discuss the most classified information. And Michael Cohen does not have a government security clearance, right? So he can't discuss. He doesn't have classified information. And your members, you know classified things, but you can't tell Michael Cohen because he doesn't have a clearance.
Right. So it's a way to, so the audience understands, it's a way to keep everything secret, even though there's nothing that Michael Cohen knows that would be classified, and there's nothing that we could share with him that would be classified. So that's why I say this was all about building the narrative out, because what do they want to have? Even though Michael Cohen, we asked over and over, you know, at least what you saw publicly, and even his lawyer last night said that he's not changing his position. He testified a year and a half ago that he had no evidence of collusion, conspiracy, or obstruction, It's still the same today. His lawyer said so last night on television. But what he did say now is that there's this, I mean, you have to really wear your tinfoil hat to believe this, that there's a secret code that Donald Trump talks in, and that's what Michael Cohen knows.
Right. Right. That's it. Now, I want to come to Tom, and basically you're a leader in doing this sort of investigation outside of government. And you have perfected the art of using a lawsuit to try to shake loose information. So what are you trying to shake loose right now?
Well, we want to know about the deep state effort to overthrow the President of the United States. You know, in many ways, it's remarkable. The President is a crime victim. He was targeted illegally by the Obama administration. You know, the story this week isn't about Cohen's testimony. It's about the abuse of power by Congress targeting him and violating his rights by destroying his attorney-client privileges, taking documents they don't have any right to. You know, Mr. Cummings and frankly Schiff may as well broken into his offices and taking those documents, legally speaking, by illicitly bringing in Mr. Cohen and taking documents from them that he had no right to. And it's, you know, Judicial Watch that is getting these documents out. The trouble with Congress is that they're able sometimes to get documents but can't release them. And Judicial Watch uses this legal process, not WikiLeaks, a legal process, to get these documents out, showing the FISA abuses, showing there were never any hearings about the targeting of President Trump through spy warrants, showing that Christopher Steele was paid with the FBI funds, seemingly in a joint operation with the Clinton campaign and the DNC. All that's coming out through independent investigations. We've heard elements of it thanks to Devin Nunes, but the documents are only coming out through independent investigations despite objections of this Justice Department and this FBI, which I think remains a challenge for those of us seeking transparency here.
And Byron, if I may, just to build on what Tom said, people need to understand what they're doing here. They're not going to find collusion. They're not going to find obstruction. You're already seeing them leak out that Mueller's not going to have anything. So Tom made a very important point. They're using these documents that they're getting because now what they're going to target is they're going to target all of Trump's businesses. And that's what this all is about. Get as many documents as you can. Say that you have these secret documents that nobody's seen before, and then there'll be this new supposed crime that Trump at some point
and
did.
Zero oversight over the Mueller operation. It's King Mueller of the Justice Department. He's one of the reasons we can't get access to this information. And in terms of an outrage, Mueller has been a zombie investigation for well over a year now. They've known for well over a year there's been no Russia collusion, yet he's been allowed to rampage through the countryside, targeting these ancillary individuals over, in many ways, what are nonsense in prosecutions, and no one's shutting it down. Mueller needs to be shut down, and I'm kind of an outlier here. There's this debate about the report. There's a debate about the transparency of a report. This Justice Department has no business writing reports on the president's conduct as president, his conduct of foreign policy, his decision to fire Comey. We already have one shady dossier, Byron, and we don't need Mueller's operatives who are anti-Trumpers writing another shady dossier for use by their allies on the Hill, again, to try to illicitly overthrow our president. It's not about Russia. It's about protecting our republic. And as far as I'm concerned, Hillary Clinton may as well has gavelled those hearings into session this week because her ghost is looming over this because but for this investigation, you can bet she'd be on the dock.
Well, these hearings are the direct result of the 2018 elections. And you used to be chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and now you are the ranking member. And that's an enormous difference. So Democrats are using the power that the voters gave them. Now, as far as your investigation, how can you carry on without the power that you had as chairman?
Well, luckily, the only thing that we don't have now is subpoena power, but we still have the power to continue to investigate. One of the things that I'm going to begin to lay out is kind of the final phase of our investigation. Now, some of that's going to take, the work that Tom's doing is very, very helpful to get documents out. But I think there needs to be, the White House is going to have to ultimately get involved to declassify all documents. And I actually think, I'm not sure that I disagree with Tom. I don't think Mueller has any report to put out that would be worthwhile of anything new. But if he does put out a report, then you're gonna see people claiming, oh, we have to have this public, it's gotta be made public.
Right.
That's fine, but I want everything that Mueller did made public. I want every email, I want everybody that they wiretapped, every warrant that they got. Every single thing that Mueller used needs to be made public for all of America to see.
Mueller's not good. Part of the Mueller report is not going to be Strzok's bias, Page's bias, the misuse of the FISA applications. None of that corruption behind the formation and operations of the Mueller investigation are going to be part of this report. And this is why we need Congress, to the extent they're able to provide the oversight. And frankly, that's why we have Judicial Watch, because we're frankly the only ones providing oversight of the Mueller operation, because Congress is AWOL on it largely. And the courts are extremely deferential to the prosecutors of the Justice Department. And this is a big test for A.G. Barr, the new Attorney General. Not will he stand up to President Trump, but will he stand up for President Trump and for the rule of law?
Let me go now to the congressman, and looking back on these 2 years of the Trump administration that you were the chairman, I think one of the things that really surprised a number of Republicans outside of Congress was when you began to try to find out what the FBI, what the Justice Department had done in the Trump investigation. You're a Republican chairman, they're a Republican-led Justice Department, and you're getting stonewalled by this. And I think a lot of Republicans were kind of surprised by the fact that this Republican Justice Department was stonewalling you on this. So the question is, what do you think was going on?
Well, the Republicans the Trump administration never had control of the Justice Department. I mean, that's really what happened.
Well, they appointed the Attorney General.
They were, right when Attorney General Sessions came in, and his biggest problem is that they had set him up, and they came to him and said, we've got this information, you're going to have to recuse based on these rules of the Justice Department. And that was the single biggest mistake that I think Attorney General Sessions ever made, and it really set back everything, because the Attorney General at the time, former senator, he of all people knew when they came to him and said, we have a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign and you and everybody else. He should have looked in and said, what the hell is wrong with you people? Get the hell out, you're all fired. I mean, he had to know that the Trump campaign wasn't colluding with Russians.
Mm-hmm. And this Justice Department has been frustrating for Judicial Watch, because the deep state, or frankly the top state that's refused to exercise their prerogatives in terms of getting this information out, it's been worse for us in many ways in terms of transparency than it was under the Obama administration.
Really?
At least with the Clinton emails, the Obama administration knew the whole world was watching. But once President Trump came into power, they thought they could do whatever they want because Sessions had recused himself, and the political leadership of both the Justice Department and the FBI are institutionalists. They kind of defer to the bureaucrats, because there's always a good legal argument not to be transparent. But it doesn't help self-government, and it doesn't help us battle corruption. So you've got this institutional interest versus the interest that you have in making sure these government agencies are kept under control. For instance, while they're going full bore, this Justice Department, against President Trump, we're still litigating over Clinton emails, and they're opposing us every which way. And just recently it was over the objections of this Justice Department that a federal court judge granted us discovery. We'll be gathering evidence. We'll be questioning Hillary Clinton's lawyer. Justice Department won't. Congress won't. And all of this is over the objections of the State Department and Justice Department. It's extraordinary. These agencies are targeting the president for removal, and I don't mean at the top level, but institutionally, while protecting Hillary Clinton. The collusion continues.
And don't forget, just to add an exclamation point to this, remember, it took our investigation to uncover the House Intelligence Committee, the Republicans. We're the ones that uncovered Bruce Orr, who was the #1 career official in the Justice Department, who was sitting next door to Rod Rosenstein's office. He was there until we uncovered that his wife was working for Fusion GPS, and he had essentially been acting as an FBI informant, meeting with Christopher Steele after Christopher Steele had been fired.
Right.
I mean, that's how high the corruption went, where you had basically people implanted at the very top of the Justice Department. And hopefully now Barr's going to get in there and clean all this out. But we've had a 2-year delay in the start of this administration.
And they're still hiding records. They're still hiding records, Barr. Text messages. FBI doesn't think text messages should be released under FOIA. So all those text messages you may be interested in from Andrew McCabe, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, Congress may have some of them. The Justice Department and FBI think you should have none of them.
And the bigger point, we should remind everyone that the very fact that we know that the dossier was assigned and paid for by the Clinton campaign, you discovered. We would not have known that without the House investigation. So,
and I want to say Republicans specifically, because remember, the Democrats opposed every single move that we made.
And I wanted to use that to make my own little plea for radical transparency in this entire investigation. We need to see pretty much everything that both the Senate, the House, and the special counsel uncover in this. And as an example, your committee, when you were chairman, interviewed 50-plus figures in your own Russia investigation, including Michael Cohen and including Roger Stone. There are these transcripts. Right. You have them. And the committee voted unanimously, meaning Democrats too, voted unanimously last fall to make them public. But you had to send them to the intelligence community for clearance, just in case they might have something classified in them. And most of these were not classified. They're with private people like Michael Cohen and Roger Stone. And a lot of foot dragging has taken place, and we still have not seen these.
Right.
And what can you now, as a minority member of Congress, do to make this happen?
This is actually not Congress's fault here, okay? We sent these last fall to the ODNI, okay, the Director of National Intelligence, who is supposedly checking with everybody, including the special counsel, sharing this testimony, okay? Now, that was September, and here we are I guess it's March, and there's absolutely no reason why this has not been released publicly. But at the end of the day, this is the White House. The White House needs to pick up the phone, call the DNI, and said, enough, release this. Congress said release it, get it out.
Why haven't they done that?
That'd be a good question tomorrow when the president's here. You guys can ask him.
Look, Devin Nunes is the exception that proves the rule in congressional oversight. Just typically, chairmen don't do the work that Nunes had done, and that's one of the reasons we're in the position we're in. This is a failure by the administration. It's a failure by Congress. It's 6 months since we first learned about the coup discussions at the Justice Department and FBI. Not one congressional hearing. Judicial Watch filed a federal lawsuit. Why are we doing all the heavy lifting with virtually no help from the administration, no help from Congress on this? This is a core. Forget about the national emergency on the border. I think there is a national emergency on the border. There's a national emergency in terms of this effort by the agencies to overthrow the president through these illicit coup discussions. If there were generals and colonels talking like this, you'd all know what it was. But because they're bureaucrats over at FBI and DOJ, media is giving it a pass. And of course, the media, Byron, your colleagues in the media.
Thank you so much.
You know, again, Byron, the exception that proves the rule in terms of oversight.
Now, we have to close up, but I'd like to ask you in closing each to give your preview of the next 2 years in this. Democrats are in charge through at least the election of 2020. The special counsel is still in business, no matter what the rumors say. How does this end in the next couple of years?
Well, I believe it's going to end once you have full radical transparency, including, and I'll just finish up with this, Tom mentioned it, but the media was in on this from the beginning. I often say that the only people in Washington who didn't have the dossier from the Clinton campaign were House Republicans and the Trump campaign. Everybody else had it. Everybody in the media had the dossier starting in June, July, August, September, October, November of 2016, and you know it. It doesn't take any top secret, or you don't have to surveil anybody. All you have to do is look at the press releases that the Clinton campaign was putting out, the tweets that the Clinton campaign was putting out, and then all the stories that the media was writing that ultimately they turned around and took those reports and fed them into the FBI, and the FBI opened an investigation. So all of this needs to come out. As soon as it does, I think we can get DOJ and FBI back on the road to recovery. Because if they don't do this, you will have generations of conservatives and Republicans in this country who will not trust DOJ or an FBI, and that is not a good place for this country to be.
You know, look, from Judicial Watch's perspective, there's going to be more accountability for Hillary Clinton, more exposure. More exposure of the deep state machinations against President Trump. But in many ways, more of the same. But the big X factor is the president, because his direct involvement on these transparency and anti-corruption issues can lead to historic transformation at the DOJ and FBI. If left to their own devices, we won't get the information in a timely enough way, or there won't be sufficient accountability. And the president, I would encourage just to be the best president he can be and exercise the full authority he has to direct the Justice Department, that is not a fourth branch of government, that works for him, to clean house. And his personal involvement, as it was initially with the release of the Nunes memo famously last year, led to the FISA applications being released. His firing of Comey, I'm convinced we would not know what we know about the deep state activities against him but for his firing of Comey that was protecting all of that. More of that will have a big change.
And much more to come. I want to thank everybody for coming here and allowing us a little time to talk. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is A Line in the Sand, a debate on America's role in Syria, featuring Buck Sexton of The Buck Sexton Show and Mark Thiessen from American Enterprise Institutes, moderated by the Foreign Desk's Lisa Daftari.
Good morning, everyone. We thought we'd start off this morning with a nice light subject like Syria to get your day going. I have the pleasure of sharing the stage this morning with Buck Sexton, the host of the nationally syndicated Buck Sexton Show on radio and podcast. His program is heard over 120 stations across the country. He's been a frequent guest host for Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. He's also the co-host of Hill's Rising and a columnist for thehill.com as well. Formerly, Buck was a CIA analyst in the Counterterrorism Center and Office of Iraq Analysis and served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's also worked for the NYPD Intelligence Division on counterterrorism cases. And to my immediate left is Mark Thiessen, a former White House chief speechwriter, Fox News contributor, columnist at The Washington Post. He served as a member of the White House senior staff under President George W. Bush, where he was the lead writer on 2 State of the Union speeches, and before that, a speechwriter to Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. He was in the Pentagon when it was hit on 9/11, traveled 250,000 miles around the world with Rumsfeld, and he is the author of the CIA Terrorist Interrogation Program book called Courting Disaster. And he's a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute.
Great.
A little over 2 months ago, President Trump tweeted, "We were originally going to be there for 3 months," referring to Syria. And that was 7 years ago. When I became president, ISIS was going wild. Now ISIS is largely defeated, and other local countries, including Turkey, should be able to easily take care of whatever remains. We're coming home. Now, to get the conversation going, I'm going to start with a lightning round question, and I just want you to answer in a yes or no. Did we accomplish what we set to accomplish in Syria? Mark?
We are accomplishing what we're setting out to do, but we're not done.
Yes or no, Mark?
Almost.
Buck?
Yes, we've accomplished the mission.
Mark, I'm going to come back to you because it seems like you're not as resolute on your answer. You know, I think there was a lot of controversy in the last 7 or 8 years with our involvement in Syria. It's not just this moment of withdrawal. Our questions, and they were very, very valid questions, were what do we want out of the situation in Syria? Do we want Bashar al-Assad to stay? Do we want him to go? Are we there just for ISIS? Do you think there was ever a clear-cut goal or strategy in Syria, and what was that?
You're asking me. So yes, I think there is a clear-cut goal, which is to reverse the damaging effect of Barack Obama's precipitous withdrawal from Iraq, which allowed ISIS to recover. So let me start by taking you back with a story that explains a little bit of why I think why I support President Trump's decision to keep 400 troops in Syria, which he announced in the last week. When I was in the White House, President Bush called me into the Oval Office one day and said, "I want you to write a speech revealing the existence of the CIA's terrorist interrogation program." And he gave me access to, at the time, that was the single most classified covert operation in the United States government. I was given access to all of the intelligence that was produced by that program. And very importantly, I got to know the interrogators, Buck's colleagues at the CIA, who questioned Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the people behind the 9/11 attacks, and got them to tell us their plans for new attacks. And I met the man who actually waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And after Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was waterboarded, he actually became a font of cooperation with our intelligence community. And he would actually the guy who waterboarded him actually would sit in his cell between formal sessions and just talk and keep him company. And one day they were talking in his cell, and KSM was explaining to this CIA officer why it was that they were going to prevail. And he said that Americans have powerful weapons, but they have a weapon that's more powerful than anything we have, which is patience. And he said, and this is a quote from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, "We will win because Americans don't realize we do not need to defeat you militarily. We only need to fight long enough for you to defeat yourselves by quitting." That's the man who brought down the Twin Towers. And that was a prophetic statement because in 2011, Barack Obama made it come true. Barack Obama withdrew all of our forces from Iraq against the advice of all of his military commanders. At the time, they had controlled no territory, like they don't control territory in Syria today, and they had about 700 fighters under arms, according to John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time. And within a very short period of time, they went from 700 fighters to 40,000 fighters. They invaded Iraq and took over an area of Iraq and Syria the size of Great Britain. And they began focusing on external operations again. They spread out their murderous tentacles into 29 countries and carried out 149 attacks in places like London and Paris and Brussels that killed over 2,000 people and injured tens of thousands more. And so when Donald Trump came into office, he inherited this mess from Barack Obama, and he took the gloves off of our military, and he unleashed them on ISIS, and he drove them out of their caliphate. And he deserves credit for that. But ISIS is not defeated. They still have 30,000 fighters under arms because they didn't fight to the death in every one of those cities. And they stole $400 million from Iraqi banks, which they've invested throughout the Middle East. And so right now, thanks to Donald Trump, we have our boot back on the necks of the terrorists. If we take our boot off of their necks, They're going to regroup, reconstitute, and do exactly what they did when Barack Obama took his boot off their necks, and they're going to come after us here at home.
But to what end? I mean, you know, I hear this, and it's a very valid argument. But this is where we're going to get a little Jerry Springer for you all, because this is the point where I know Buck and Mark do not agree. The question I want to pose to you, Buck, is to what end? How do we define victory in a situation where over 400,000 people have died? It's produced 5 million refugees, 6 million have become displaced, and it does not look like there will be any stability in Syria in the near future. So to what end do we stay there? That instability will be a breeding ground for terrorism. So how do we define victory, and to what end do we stay there?
The mission set in Syria is straightforward: the destruction of the territorial caliphate that led to all the horrors that my friend and colleague here laid out for you. I would also offer to you that when you're going to try to end an endless war, there will be risks, there will be trade-offs. But the alternative is endless war. It was because of the 9/11 attacks when I was in college that I joined the Central Intelligence Agency. It was because of the 9/11 attacks that I found myself in Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times years later. How are those projects looking now, by the way? President Trump came into office because he understood that these are not things that are going the way we have been told they would go. In the case of Syria, if you look at a map right now of what's actually happening in Syria, you will see that this is a proxy war nightmare. The Russians, the Iranians, the Turks. There is, in fact, an area now that doesn't even get any news coverage, Idlib in northern Syria, where a group called, formerly the Nusra Group, now it's HTS, they keep changing the name, it's al-Qaeda in Syria. We're not even focused on that area. It's effectively the al-Qaeda affiliate. They've taken territory. And now there is a proxy war going on for that region. Never mind ISIS. We are not going to be out of this country for decades if we sit in place. Now, to the point about 400 troops, it was a few thousand troops. And those are the official troops, by the way. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Those are the official numbers in that country. We've drawn down to 400. This is heading in the right direction. President Trump is right on the strategy. The tactics he's been willing to talk to his advisors about and put it on a longer timeline out. But what do we think the end state is, to actually get to your question? The Assad regime isn't going anywhere. Iran isn't going anywhere. These other proxy war fighters in the region aren't leaving no matter what. We can work behind the scenes, we can work with allies, we can work with the Kurds. There's a lot that we can do without establishing a permanent military presence. Just look at a timeline of US troops in Iraq, in Afghanistan. These mission sets go up, they go down. It was over 100,000 under Obama in Afghanistan. Now it's down to less than 10,000. Have we made progress there? Is this a place where any of you would want to send your children to fight? I would not want to go back, because it's not a war we will win. It's a war that we can avoid losing, but that's not the same thing. We need to be honest about this. The foreign policy echo chamber in DC never changes its mind about anything, because everyone wants to go to think tank meetings and sound smart. We cannot win these conflicts if you think that winning means rebuilding these countries for the people inside of them. Yeah. And so to your point about Syria and what we're doing there, I hope that we have no permanent US military presence on the ground, because I'm telling you, another emergency will come up, the Kurds and the Turks will be at each other's throats, something will happen, and all of a sudden, some of you perhaps in this audience or your sons and daughters are going to be walking around the streets of Idlib saying, what are we doing here again? Enough is enough. It has been decades already. We're done.
Yeah. So let me respond to that. So here's the thing. I understand that after 18 years of war, a lot of people are tired of war, and I get that. And people ask the question, when can we come home? And the answer is, in Buck's question, is that we don't get to decide when the war ends, because the enemy gets a vote, okay? So if we stop fighting and they don't, that's not good for America. So in traditional wars that we fought over our history, victory is pretty easy when you're fighting a traditional enemy to define. Victory is a signing ceremony on the USS Missouri when they take off their uniforms, turn over their arms, and sign a surrender document. ISIS is never going to sign a surrender document. Al-Qaeda is never going to sign a surrender document because they are, in Osama bin Laden's words, fighting a war of destiny between infidelity and Islam. So they are going to keep fighting. If we stop fighting and they keep fighting, we lose. We fulfill KSM's prophecy. So we don't get to choose when the war ends, but we do get a choice. We get to choose where it's fought. It can be fought over there, or it can be fought over here. It can be fought in the deserts of Syria and the mountains of Afghanistan, or it can be fought in the streets of New York and in the Pentagon where I was when the planes hit on September 11, 2001. That's the choice we get, and that's the only choice we get, and we got to keep fighting to make sure that those people never come back and commit the attack like they did on September 11, 2001 again.
I would offer that if that is, and that is the position that has been taken really in a bipartisan fashion now for a long time in D.C. Now we've had millions of veterans serving, come back, serving, come back. We need to set up permanent bases in Yemen, in Somalia, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Pakistan, in the Philippines. How many places are we going to say we need to fight them over there so they don't get us over here? At what point?
Wherever they are.
At what point? Well, we're gonna have to do a whole lot of military deployments for as long as all of us in this room are alive.
That's true.
What have we gained?
I want to push back on Mark for a minute here, because specifically, when we all can acknowledge that it is not a traditional enemy.
Yes.
But then we are employing the definition of the enemy dictating when the war is over. So our enemies will forever be in Syria, because they're not, when you have external factors in Syria, now to that point, when you have 400 troops remaining, what would be your advice to the president in terms of how to go forward in this next chapter in Syria?
So here's the question that we get from people who hold Buck's side. It's like, why do we have to fight all these wars? Why can't they fight their own wars in these countries, right? Fair question. That's what we're doing in Syria, okay? So go back in history to the 1980s when one of our greatest presidents of American history, Ronald Reagan, came into office. And we were just at the end of the Vietnam era when we had deployed hundreds of thousands of troops to fight communism in Vietnam, and there was no hunger whatsoever in the American public for going out with massive deployments to fight wars in foreign countries. But Soviet communism was on the march. And so Ronald Reagan came up with a strategy called the Reagan Doctrine, which is that we are not going to go and send our troops everywhere to do the fighting. What we're going to do is we're going to send advisors and trainers to train indigenous forces to fight the communists in those countries. And so we armed the Nicaraguan Contras, and we armed the Angolan resistance, and we did this all over the world. What we're doing in Syria today is exactly the Reagan Doctrine. Our troops are not fighting, except for those CIA folks that Buck was referring to. The 2,000 troops that we have in Syria are not doing the fighting. They are mostly special operations forces, they're artillery forces, and they're forward air controllers. What we've done is we've trained up Kurdish and Arab fighters who are the ones going out and doing the fighting. The American trainers plan their missions. They provide them with intelligence and targeting. They provide artillery, and they provide air cover, and the Syrian indigenous forces are doing the fighting.
Buck,
that is exactly the right strategy.
I'm going to give you the last word.
Anybody who's spent any time with indigenous forces and U.S. military embedded together will tell you that 400, which is the number we're talking about here, is really just a placeholder for a conflict the size of Syria. And the problem is that placeholder gets a lot larger. Remember, we were down to how many thousands in Afghanistan? Obama ramped it up to over 100,000, and to what end? Look at the troop deployment levels in Iraq. By the way, how long will we even be in Iraq? The most powerful politician in that country is Muqtada al-Sadr, who has the blood of U.S. servicemen on his hands. Some of you were in that war. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We don't have a long-term presence in Iraq. We should not try to have a long-term presence in Syria. All it takes is one incident one day. I mean, just to borrow from the point about Reagan and what Reagan was doing, we were on a peacekeeping mission in Lebanon. It's not talked about that often now. Multinational peacekeeping mission. Not a huge deployment of forces. We weren't the ones doing the fighting. We were just trying to keep the fighters apart. In Lebanon, right next door to Syria. In fact, many of the same factions that we see at each other's throats today. Many of the same groups. And then in one day, we lost almost 300 American servicemen because suicide bombers went after the Marine barracks in one day. And Reagan realized, you know what? This is a hornet's nest. we are not going to win this fight, and it's not our fight, and we left. That is another lesson of Reagan's that you should not forget.
And Osama bin Laden cited the U.S. withdrawal from Beirut as reason why he attacked us on 9/11, because he said the Americans are weak and decadent, don't have the stomach for the fight, and they will withdraw from if we attack them. Okay. So that decision actually helped lay into the 9/11 attacks.
Unfortunately, we have to leave the conversation there. I hope we've solved the problem in Syria for you in about 20 minutes.
Fun, man.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you to you both, wonderful panelists.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a conversation about the opioid crisis with Kellyanne Conway, Sarah Carter, and hosted by Capital Research Center's Scott Walter.
Well, it's great to be here to talk about this critical problem in America. The numbers are just stunning. CDC says the better part of 100,000 deaths a year, the vast majority from opioids in overdose cases. What is happening? Is it getting better or worse, Kellyanne?
Well, thank you, CPAC, for having me again. And I'm really glad, I'm very happy that CPAC is shining a light on this issue. The president declared a public health emergency in the first year in office. The president and the first lady both work on this public policy crisis. We call it the crisis next door because it is indiscriminate. The opioid and drug supply, drug demand crisis does not discriminate by race, by age, by gender, by socioeconomic status, by geography. It literally is in every nook and cranny in this country. As harrowing as the numbers are, the good news is the focus on more interdiction and surveillance, the focus on more access to treatment and recovery, the focus and the money that's now being given to all of those and education and prevention is starting to bend the curve in the right direction. Quickly, I'll tell you that H.R. 6 was a piece of legislation passed last year. It passed in the Senate 98-1. Every single Democratic senator running for president in 2020, albeit unsuccessfully, voted for that legislation. And I want you to remember that when they tell you that we don't need a wall at the southern border, we don't need more resources for drug interdiction, they're already on record with their vote as saying that we have a drug crisis in this country, and they voted for a whole bunch of measures, prevention, education, treatment, recovery, interdiction, surveillance, in H.R. 6. CPB and ICE have interdicted historic amounts of fentanyl. Fentanyl is an instant killer, and a tiny little grain of it can wipe us out. Little grain, and it's being laced into marijuana, heroin, meth, cocaine, and street drugs. And I want to tell the youth out there watching and here in the hall, this is not just something you can do and before. You can save a life. You can help destigmatize, break through the silence and the stigma. You're worth more than taking some street pill. You have no idea what the source of that pill is. You have no idea if it's increasingly laced with fentanyl, synthetic opioid being mainly manufactured in China and being brought into this country through different ports of entry, through our mails, and yes, illegally as well. But ICE, those who want to abolish ICE, would be giving up the 2,200 pounds of fentanyl that they interdicted over the last several years alone. And my hat's off to the brave men and women at Customs and Border Patrol and ICE for keeping us all safe with the drug crisis. Thank you.
Well, Sarah, Kellyanne brought up the border aspect of the opioid crisis. This is something you know a lot about. What do you think is some of the most important things being done at the border?
Well, right now, just the attention that we've been drawing to the border crisis is incredible. I think the administration, for the first time in my career, and I've spent the majority of my career, especially the very beginnings of my career, covering the U.S. southern border. Yeah, you know, probably all the way going back to the Daily Bulletin in California. where I can tell you this crisis has been going on for decades. This is a national emergency. Our children are dying. Our children are dying. Their parents are dying. Mothers are dying. Babies are being born exposed to drugs. And it's the worst crisis we've ever seen. I'm listening to Kellyanne and I'm thinking, for the first time, and I say this over and over again, Kellyanne, and I know you've got the world on your shoulders because you have focused so much on the opioid crisis and you've done so much incredible work to draw attention to that. But it's sometimes, it doesn't even feel like enough. I mean, it's so big out there. I mean, I have parents who say to me, Sarah, I had no idea that there were drugs on the street that look just like Xanax, look just like Percocet, but they're actually fentanyl heroin. Our kids are having parties, and they call them Skittles parties, where they bring pills and put them into bowls, and everybody just kind of picks whatever pill they want and they take them. I mean, it's kind of a shocking thing when I heard about this, just randomly taking pills. And some of these children, unbeknownst to them, are taking a Xanax that's actually a contraband Xanax, and they're dying immediately. There is no chance to save their life. They don't make it to the hospital. It was one mistake, one time, and their lives are lost. I really think we need public service announcements. I think kids need to be told what's going on. I don't think there's enough attention to that. Please, I think this is probably one of the most important things and most important crisis of our time. I have spent so much time on the US-Mexico border. I can tell you how porous it is. I remember when I first began covering the border, probably back in 2004, 2003, and Border Patrol agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they would tell me over and over again, it's like theater. Nobody's listening to us, not even in the administration. They'll put me out on a spot, and I would go out there with them. And I'm sitting here all alone, and I can't even call for backup. And I can hear and see people coming across the border or sensors going off. And at one point, believe me, Border Patrol agents, they stopped chasing them. This was a while back. They said, I can't do it because I put my life on the line and then I get charged with something if there's an altercation.
Yep.
When is somebody going to do something about it? And I think we're seeing this administration doing this right now.
Kellyanne, what are the most important tools for the administration to use on the demand and supply side?
Thank you, Sarah, for giving us that aspect. I know you've been doing, I don't know if the audience realizes how much work you've been doing on this crisis for a very long time at the border and elsewise. So a few things. I don't know if we have the ad queued up, but we brought a couple of the ads that have been running and continue to run that have been sponsored in partnership with some outside groups. These are public service announcements to really bring home. Do we have it? I don't know if we have it.
I'm not sure.
Well, we do have it. I don't know if they have time to show it. But opioid crisis, maybe we can actually share it with CPAC members in a different way. But they've been running, they've got millions and millions of impressions, actually. And we're really focused on the 18 to 24-year-olds with the halo audiences of 15 to 30-year-olds. But as I said before, this crisis is indiscriminate by age as well. And what's tricky about opioids is very simple. It's legally prescribed. So that tiny little bottle can be deceptive. It bears the label of the family doctor and the local pharmacy. And it was legally prescribed to help someone manage his or her pain. The issue is the overprescription. And I'm happy to say that under the president's leadership, in concert with many different governors and other state health officials, and the whole of government approach in his administration, much of the overprescription is starting to melt away because whether it's through guilt, professional responsibility, fear of liability, more information, whatever the combination is, it's working because we're getting fewer pills into the supply chain. Number two, there's something called National Take Back Day. It's gone on for about 8.5 years. And it's the last Saturday in April, so it's coming up, and the last Saturday in October. This is important because it's the day when you can bring your unused, expired, unneeded drugs to police stations, local pharmacies, many other places. One thing we're doing in the administration is we're trying to make every day Take Back Day. so you don't have to have the pills sitting around for 6 months until the next take-back day. Many community pharmacists, many chain pharmacies, certainly our National Safety Council provides ways to the public to dispose of these drugs safely and legally before, in between the take-back days. The First Lady has really brought great attention to an issue that Sarah just touched upon that I would like to amplify for a moment. The First Lady, Mrs. Melania Trump, is very committed to the NAS babies, neonatal abstinence syndrome. 1 in 100 babies born every day in this country are already exposed or chemically dependent on some type of drug or substance. That's 150 babies each day struggling to take their first breaths. And since we already have the most pro-life president in American history, this, just thought I'd get that in there. This is a natural extension of that, is trying to help those newborns. There is more additional funding and additional awareness in the legislation that I talked about before that the Democrats all voted for in the House and the Senate. Every single Democrat that voted, and every single Democratic senator did vote, voted for that legislation, and I don't want you to forget it. The other tools that are important is for people to understand pain management need not always mean pain medication, and that we're not talking about the millions and millions of Americans, my own mother included, hi Mom, who rely upon pain medication to get through their daily lives. That's chronic pain medication. We're talking opioids are really meant to be temporary pain relief for the collegiate or high school athlete injury, for the dental procedure. Many of the opioids prescribed to youth are prescribed because of dental procedures and for routine surgeries. We're talking about the management of temporary pain. And so what people need to do is, we're all told, know your own body, you have the right, you do have the right to say no to overprescribing. When your pain is managed, you can bring those drugs somewhere else. But I want to tell you the really great news. We don't believe that treatment and recovery stops in the doctor's office or in the treatment center. We're trying a whole of government approach to treat the whole person. So the displaced worker grant program, for example, the things that we're doing with Department of Labor, the Envision Centers at HUD, private companies like, I think Mike Lindell from My Pillow is here. He set up a Lindell Recovery Center in Minnesota. Thank you, Mike. Belden Industries in Indiana, if you fail a drug test, instead of losing your job, which means you lose the pathway to recovery for many people also, instead of losing your job, Belden Industries and other employers like them will let you keep that job, but you must immediately enter a treatment program. And they're working with local community colleges, and they're working with the local health professionals. Unshattered is a nonprofit that helps women get back on their feet and helps to employ them, connect them with educational employment opportunities. So we're trying to treat the whole person. And frankly, the issue has just been ignored for many, many years, and we're not going to turn a blind eye to it. It's truly the equivalent of an airplane falling from the sky every day in American deaths. I want you to think about that, because if an airplane was falling from the sky every single day, we would all stop and say, why are the airplanes falling from the sky? So essentially, the president is saying, pay attention to it that way. Join me, he is saying, in doing each of our individual small part in combating the single worst drug crisis in American history.
And I want to just buttress right off of that, because Kellyanne's right. And when you talk to parents who've lost their children, I say, what is one of the biggest lessons you've learned? And they say, take away the shame. Yes. It is our responsibility to face this, because if we're too ashamed to face the truth, too ashamed to listen to our children and to listen to our family members, then the drug cartels are going to win, right? Because they are moving these narcotics in. This is not just about the pharma industry, although, there's bear a lot of responsibility on overprescription, and we've heard that before. But what about the drug cartels? Sinaloa, Juarez, the China market, the Russian market of fentanyl, and the movement of these narcotics into the United States. We have to say no more. You are not allowed to poison our kids. You can try, but we are going to fight you every single day. We are not going to allow you to do this. We are going to back up policies that will change this. And, you know, and then things will change. If we choose to ignore what's happening to our country, we are going to lose a generation of children. I can tell you that. I've never seen anything quite like this than when I went to the epicenter in Ohio and other states who are facing this crisis, where the morgues were so overflowing with bodies that they had to rent freezer trailers to put the children in the freezer trailers outside of the mortuary. I never saw anything like this. I never saw the way people cried and begged and pleaded for someone to just pay attention. And even those that are working undercover in the DEA, in places like Ohio. I mean, Ohio, for crying out loud, middle America, and they're saying it's being divided up by the drug cartels. I mean, the drug cartels own territory in our own country. So think about that. And think about what this crisis is doing, and think about what this administration is doing, because for the first time, we're actually seeing an administration that cares enough to do something about it and not just ignore it.
With Kellyanne, there are people, no doubt, in this room at this moment who are facing this crisis in their own families. What would you say to them?
Well, first, you're not alone. We see you, we hear you, and we're with you. And the we is really the whole of government approach across the federal government horizontally, but more importantly, it's the vertical approach. It's the federal, state, and local, and we don't substitute our judgment for what the healthcare providers locally, law enforcement, and the families believe is the best way to combat this crisis. The best thing you can do is break through the stigma and the silence and let people know, learn how to detect the misuse and the overuse and the abuse. And also, I think, to really raise awareness, because we've done a masterful job in this country raising awareness against drunk driving, for example, or about different types of cancer. We've raised awareness, we've raised money for that, heart disease, thank God. But this is a bigger killer now than cancer, than breast cancer, than accidents, than gun violence, all these different problems that we have, killers that we have been able to raise awareness about. And so for me, I think that number one thing to do is to make sure people know two words in our everyday lexicon, and the president has been on the front lines of doing this himself. One word is fentanyl, F-E-N-T-A-N-Y-L. And so I do talk about not biased coverage, because that's easy to see if you want, but incomplete coverage. If this country doesn't know what fentanyl is, then lots of folks are falling down on the job and not giving you the news you can actually use, information relevant to you. Chinese fentanyl. Fentanyl is an instant killer. It's the grain I talked about. It's what Sarah and others are speaking about also. But that is, 28 states have seen a massive increase in death by synthetic opioids, which includes fentanyl. And it's insidious and it's lethal. Number two, Narcan, or naloxone. The Surgeon General issued his first advisory in 13 years, and it was about making sure that naloxone is with all of us, that we know how to use naloxone. Naloxone is an overdose reversing drug, very easy to use. We're getting it increasingly in our schools, at our YMCAs, at our libraries, places where the public is traversing, and God forbid if Sarah is overdosing, any of us can take that and help reverse that overdose. It's literally saving lives. You can save a life. And finally, to understand that in dozens and dozens, most states, over 30 states or so, have the Good Samaritan law. So if somebody is overdosing, you can drive that individual, no questions asked, no liability to you. And that's saving lives, because in the past, people would just open up the car door and fire up the engine away, and the bluing corpse would roll out near the emergency room door. Now you can go to a fire station, a police station, a hospital, and that is literally saving lives. You know, in many of the fire stations across this country, those fire stations are 2, 3, 4 times more likely to receive a call to respond to a drug overdose than a fire.
Yeah.
So they have been learning how to help administer care, life-saving care, and do that warm handoff to health professionals. There's so much you can do in your own community, and it really begins with each of us. I think since it's the crisis next door, the solutions are next door as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, this is a crisis that we are all dealing with, every one of our families. Kellyanne's right. Every friend, I'm sure we all know someone or know somebody in our neighborhood or somebody in our family that's dealing with this. I wanted to add something to that. We did a nonprofit film. I did a nonprofit film last year called Not in Vain. You can see it at notinvainusa.com. If you want to learn more about this crisis and be able to connect with the people who have been affected by it. I think this is so important. This is a top priority for this administration, and it has to be. I know they're holding themselves accountable for it because they're doing everything they can. But this is a top priority for each one of us as Americans if we want to save our country and we want to stop the poison that's flowing in and killing our citizens and our children. And we should not allow it to happen. And remember, look at this as this is an attack. This is an attack on your kids, and every time they go to school, into middle school, there's somebody there trying to recruit them. They're children. They don't always make the right decisions. We have to guide them. We have to teach them, and we have to be there to watch over them as a nation and as parents. So please do that, please.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That's a great last word, and everyone should definitely see the film Not in Vain. I want to thank Kellyanne and Sarah for all that you're doing on this critical crisis. Thanks.
Thank you.
Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man.
We are coming together at a crucial time in our nation's history. America is making great strides towards freedom and liberty, but she also confronts determined foes and faces enormous challenges. Challenges that strike directly at the core principles that all of us here hold so dear. Free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional values, and national security. Across America and the world, we see where liberalism has left its devastating mark. In homes, in schools, in communities, and in capitals. That's why our work is so important, and it's what the Heritage Foundation is all about. At Heritage, we're not just a bulwark against the left, we're a battleship for liberty. We are determined to guide America to renewed greatness and to take the fight to liberalism.
That's why I'm so proud to serve as the Heritage Foundation's president, and why I'm so honored to join with you here at CPAC in the fight for the greatest nation on earth.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next topic, nationhood and the border crisis. A conversation with Senator Ted Cruz and Rich Lowry of the National Review.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our conversation with the newly elected Senator from Texas, Ted Cruz. I'm Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, and as some of you might know, I've had a little bit of a complicated relationship with Donald Trump, but we had a little bit of a breakthrough, I think, a while ago. I went back to my office, and I found this brown envelope from the White House on my desk. I was very curious what this was. I opened up the envelope, And it's this ripped out copy of one of my columns that ran in the New York Post. And I consider the New York Post the nation's newspaper. More importantly, the President of the United States considers the New York Post the nation's newspaper. And this is a column I'd written about how Trump was just such a dominating political and cultural presence. There's really no escaping him, even for Republicans who want to try to. And I thought it had a lot of incisive, trenchant commentary in this column. Made no impression on him. What he focused on was the headline that the New York Post editors had put on this column, which was, "There is only Trump." And Trump had taken out his black Sharpie, circled the headline, wrote a big arrow down to it, and wrote, "Rich, so true, Donald J. Trump." So we're going to talk a little bit about nationalism and about the border crisis. And Senator, one thing that really came out of this shutdown fight and the contention over building more barrier at the border is it kind of smoked out a foundational issue where you had top Democrats, Nancy Pelosi among them, saying walls themselves are immoral. You had Democrats saying, comparing our border barrier to the Berlin Wall, the barrier of a totalitarian society meant to keep its people inside rather than people coming illegally from outside. And this raised the question, if you think barriers are immoral, what are you going to do with the barrier we have? And someone you know a lot about, Robert Francis O'Rourke, actually answered this question in an interview and said, yeah, let's break out the bulldozers and knock down the border wall we have in El Paso, Texas. What do you make of this?
Look, I think there's a technical description for what's going on, which is that Democrats have gone bat crap crazy.
That's a political science term of art, right?
If you look at the medical dictionary, it's under B. It is, in fact, a psychosis. Look, they're getting more and more and more extreme on every issue. Think back to the State of the Union. The State of the Union was a display of just how radical Democrats have gotten, where they embraced, they sat there embracing late-term abortion. Now, some of us are old enough to remember Bill Clinton standing there and at least claiming he wanted to see abortion safe, legal, and rare. Now, he wasn't telling the truth, but he was at least emphasizing rare. That's no longer the position of the Democratic Party. They are now for late-term abortion up to the moment of birth, or if you're Ralph Northam, after birth. I mean, that's crazy stuff. On immigration, you used to have Democrats who would say, well, yes, we should secure the border and we should have amnesty. That was the old Democratic position, and a lot of Republicans. Now, their position is, no, don't secure the border at all. Let everybody in and have amnesty. I mean, it is disconnected. And if you look at the fight over the border wall, it's important to understand it wasn't about substance. So in 2013, not too many years ago, Chuck Schumer and every single Democrat in the Senate voted in favor of 350 miles of new border wall. The shutdown we just had a month ago was over 234 miles of new border wall. Same new border wall. Now, look, I'm not smart enough to explain how you're for 350 miles of new wall, but willing to shut the government down to stop 234 miles of new wall. And at the end of the day, it's real simple. It is emotional, visceral hate. This is not based on logic. They don't have an argument. Here is their reasoning. Trump equals wall. We, the Democrats, hate Trump, therefore no wall. That's it.
So let me ask you, because I think one of my great frustrations watching how this played out, and I imagine the same is true of a lot of people in the room today, is Republicans had unified control of government in Washington, D.C., if I'm not mistaken, for 2 years.
Yes.
And how was it that we only came to focus on achieving one of the president's signature promises when Nancy Pelosi was becoming Speaker of the House? What happened in the prior 2 years that there wasn't funding for the barrier?
It is a very good question. Let me say both good and bad. Let's start with the good. I do think with a Republican president, Republican majorities in both houses, I think we won some big, big victories the last 2 years. We shouldn't lose sight of those. We passed an historic tax cut, the biggest tax cut of a generation, that included, among other things, repealing the Obamacare individual mandate. We've repealed job-killing regulations, and we're seeing the lowest unemployment in 50 years. We're seeing wages going up. We're seeing the lowest African-American unemployment that has ever been recorded. We're seeing the lowest Hispanic unemployment that has ever been recorded, which is why the mainstream media won't cover those facts at all. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
It's just getting warmed up.
As I said, there's good and bad. I'm going to talk about the good first. We've also seen strong constitutionalist judges confirmed. On foreign policy, we're in the middle of the biggest military rebuild since Ronald Reagan. We've moved our embassy to Jerusalem, and we pulled out of the Iranian nuclear deal. Those are big, big victories, and they're victories that as conservatives we should be grateful we were able to deliver on. Now, you asked quite rightly, why didn't we finish the job on immigration? Why didn't we build the wall? Why didn't we deliver on more promises? I agree with you. We should have done much, much more. And I can tell you, last summer, starting in August, I did a long presentation to Senate Republicans that said, look, if you look at history, unified control of the federal government, both houses of Congress and the presidency, it's exceptionally rare for Republicans. It has happened a total of 8 years since World War II. And I said that everyone recognizes there's a real chance we're going to lose at least one house of Congress in November. If that's true, I think at the time there were 183 days to go. And I entitled the presentation, Carpe Diem, seize the day. If we have 183 days left to legislate, let's do that. And what I urged is let's use vehicles that the Democrats can't filibuster. In particular, let's use something called budget reconciliation, which y'all will remember was the vehicle that we passed the tax cut on in 2017. What matters about reconciliation is it's immune from filibuster, so you can pass legislation and the Democrats can't stop it. And what I urged my colleagues, and I urged the president, I urged the vice president, I urged the administration, let's take up a budget reconciliation and let's build the wall, let's fund the wall, let's get it done. And I want you just to imagine, if they had taken that advice, if we had had that fight and you had seen Elizabeth Warren screaming on the Senate floor to stop it, Bernie Sanders pulling what little hair he has out of his head, in September or October, and it culminated with Republicans standing together, funding and building the wall, I'll tell you right now, Rich, I don't think we would have lost the House of Representatives.
So let's dig a little deeper, because I talked about how in the border fight you saw some foundational issues surfaced. And I think the one that really is deepest here is the question whether we should have borders and the question of the legitimacy of the nation and the nation state and of nationalism. And there's kind of a loose notion out there that nationalism is something the Prussians came up with, these jack-booted thugs. We're really, in the Western world, the foundational nation, for the way we think about this, was ancient Israel. God says to Abraham, I will make of thee a great nation. And he does. And you read in Numbers, there's an enormous passage where God actually sets out the borders of Israel like he's a surveyor. It's going to go around this hill, down here, go over here. And what's so amazing about this story is there's going to be a distinct people with a distinct territory, and they never give up that idea of the nation, no matter what tragedies and catastrophes befall them. You have Jews revolting against Rome to reestablish their nation. And amazingly, 2 millennia later, they do succeed in reestablishing their nation. And in 1982, Menachem Begin, Prime Minister of Israel, they find the bones of some of the Jewish rebels from the last revolt against the Romans in a cave somewhere. They excavate these, they bury them with military honors, and Begin says, dear fathers, we are here in this place and we'll never leave ever again. In a nutshell, that is nationalism. that is concerned for your own nation. And I'm curious, Senator, how you think about this issue that Donald Trump has brought to the fore. It's been hugely controversial. He's been criticized by the great and good all over the world, including the president of France, saying that there's something wrong with this attitude towards the nation.
You know, the very opening words of the movie The Godfather are... That's a little bit later. The opening words are, I believe in America. Let me tell you, look, I believe in America. And one of the things that drives the media and drives the far left crazy about President Trump is that he's willing to actually stand up and defend America. There are many pathologies that afflict the left, but one of them is a fundamental embarrassment about America's greatness. You saw that with Obama. You saw it when he started his presidency going on a worldwide apology tour, where those on the left are embarrassed. They're embarrassed about our prosperity. They're embarrassed about our freedom. You know, we saw it manifested actually just this week, if any of y'all happen to see it, in a really idiotic rant. You're wondering who, because there are a lot of people that could have made that. But this particular one was Bill Maher. And Bill Maher had this rant about, he said, red states want to be blue states. We're the cool people, and they want to be just like us. Now, let me point out it was precisely that arrogant, condescending, smug superiority that is why Hillary Clinton lost and Donald Trump won in 2016. And if you desire to lead interacting with your fellow citizens saying you guys are a bunch of dumb, ignorant rubes that need to shut up and listen to me, is perhaps not the best message. I'll also say as a Texan, I can say authoritatively no Texan has ever desired to be from any other state in the country or the history of the universe.
In fact, people from the blue state, California, are moving into the red state.
In vast numbers. By the way, the blue states with high taxes, high regulations, their people are fleeing because they don't have jobs. We saw, look, when New York chased Amazon out, because a bunch of New York socialists said, now, by the way, let's pause for a second. What on earth was Amazon doing? You're doing a nationwide search. Where do you want to base your second headquarters? I know New York City. You almost deserve the pestilence that happens to you if you go into that willingly, going, okay, they're a bunch of crazy socialists. Let's go there. What do you think they'll do when we get there?
But Senator, you got to focus on, as AOC said, the $3 billion windfall that's going to accrue to New York from chasing out Amazon. You can decommission a lot of cows with that kind of money.
Look, Senator. Magic money. By the way, let me say I support cows. I hope to see PETA supporting the Republican Party now that the Democrats want to kill all the cows. But when it comes to defending America, who we are, look, we are a nation of immigrants. My dad came from Cuba with nothing. But when you come to America as an immigrant, you come because you want to believe in, you want to be part of, you want to be an American. And I'll tell you, being the child of an immigrant makes you love and value and cherish the incredible freedom that is this country.
All right, so we have time just for one last question, and obviously we're all gearing up for 2020. It's going to be an absolute war, and you had a really tough race in 2018, unexpectedly in a lot of ways. How is what happened in Texas in 2018 a preview for what we might see nationally in 2020?
Well, look, I think it foreshadows what we're going to see across the country. In Texas, in my reelection campaign, we saw on the other side they raised over $80 million. They outraised us 3-1. It became the most expensive Senate race in hard money in the history of the United States. Now, what does it mean to be outspent 3-1? It means, for example, our campaign had a total of 18 paid campaign staffers. Beto O'Rourke's campaign had 805. That's the differential we saw on the ground. And what the Democrats managed to do in Texas, they increased Democratic turnout more than 100%. It went from, in 2014, the last off-cycle election, it was at 1.8 million. They raised it all the way to 4 million. Now, fortunately, we turned out 4.2 million Republicans. That was the whole margin of victory. Now, what is the lesson for 2020? We are going to see the left turn out in massive numbers. They're going to flood cash. That differential is going to be the battle for the country. And so let me just close by saying, the men and women of CPAC, the young people of CPAC, it's going to take every one of you speaking out, volunteering, energizing, giving money, using your voice, because we're going to see a crazed assault from the left, more unhinged than anything we have seen. Now, there's also the good news. If we turn common sense conservatives out, we can win.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ted Cruz, thank you very much.
WOW is a blockchain project which aims to design an ecosystem.
This is the Liberty Ecosystem, an agile, flexible federation of local organizations and international partners working together through blockchain technology.
Allowing the 6 billion of us to counterbalance the 2 billion of them.
Giving us access to fundraising from individuals and groups around the world who share our mission.
Making it more difficult for authoritarian governments to impede on local organizations like us, because there is no centralized group, no single entity to stifle.
Together, we can keep the free world free. Join the movement at www.libertyeco.com.
You don't have self-government if you don't know what the government's up to. Judicial Watch has a highly skilled team of investigators and lawyers that know what questions to ask and know what lawsuits to file and how to litigate them in court. We have well over 30 federal lawsuits asking for documents about the targeting of Donald Trump, the abuses of the deep state, the Mueller special counsel investigation, other basic requests for information that only Judicial Watch is in court asking for the documents on. Judicial Watch's experience is you don't get these documents unless you're in court asking for them. Without Judicial Watch, we wouldn't know what we know about the IRS scandal, we wouldn't know what we know about the Benghazi scandal, and Hillary Clinton's email scandal would still be secret but for Judicial Watch.
America is built and based on liberties and freedoms. Liberty HealthShare brings that to healthcare. The liberty of choosing your own doctor, the liberty of choosing your own hospital. Liberty HealthShare makes healthcare affordable to millions of Americans. Ignite your liberty, starting at $199 for a single, $399 for a couple. No matter how big the family, only $529. That's $529 for the entire family. To learn how you can save, go to igniteyourliberty.com. Igniteyourliberty.com.
What happened to our morality? Good old-fashioned values. When kindness was a currency. When integrity was expected. Tell the truth and be honest. And people are loyal too.
Are you looking for these things in your healthcare? Choose your own doctor and hospital. Plans starting at $199 or, no matter how big the family, only $529. That's $529 for the entire family. Go to igniteyourliberty.com. That's igniteyourliberty.com.
CPAC proved once again that organizer Matt Schlapp is not afraid to stir up controversy. And it seems even I made an on-screen appearance at this year's conference. Oh, breaking news. Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yeah!
But that bit of so-called news wasn't exactly true.
I just hope my hair looked good. Did he look good?
Fabulous.
Show me the Democratic ad, the 30-second ad on Russian collusion. They didn't run it because you know what? The American people are over this. There is no case here. It's the Democrats who are going after Brett Kavanaugh because he'd be the fifth vote. Okay, it's a slur and it's a disgrace. It's all one after the other, perfectly timed. That is strange.
That's outrageous. First of all,
How outrageous is it
It's
really?
really outrageous because of the coordination.
They had a whip count on where different cabinet secretaries were on potentially removing the President of the United States from office. This is a disgusting abuse of power.
Let me agree with you. We could do it at the same volume. I think
Am I talking too loud?
I know Matt likes to create a world that is sort of fictional.
Quit saying I'm a liar, Matt.
I've never called you a liar, Matt.
You did in the first segment.
No, I did not. I said if you drank truth serum, you would actually admit what
Clever way of calling me a liar.
We're sitting here in privileged positions because we are white Americans. We know that we are socioeconomic. Deny
That's
your privilege
absurd.
all that you want.
I find that the silliest argument I've ever heard. You're suffering credibility because they feel like you have it against this president and against conservatives.
The president is driving them down.
No,
when
Jim. You have to own it yourself. You have to own your own actions. Look at the poll for how the American people view the news media. You're at the cellar. So
That's
it's
on the rise.
unfair.
Actually, their opinion of the news media is on the rise. Matt Schlapp, I'm going to have to leave it there.
On the rise? Well, that's
Matt
quite an
Schlapp,
accomplishment.
Thank
Congratulations.
you very much.
They act like they're better. They act like they're the truth tellers.
Yeah.
And was he trying to get information in order to pass it back to the United States government? Was he doing those three things?
Hey, Matt.
Why don't you, come on, let's go both ways.
Let's do it. Hey, Matt, this is what blows my mind.
Was he doing
hold
those
on,
three things?
Matt, as you know, I asked the questions of you.
Call it out.
Sure.
Just
we've
say,
been
look, this
talking
was
about
over
it.
the line.
What I'm asking you is if
Will you
you're
call it out?
Hey, Matt, I asked the questions here.
I'm going to play Matt to Matt. You should enjoy that. Here's something you said on Lou Dobbs we also wanted to press you on.
Do you watch Lou Dobbs?
Take a look.
You watch Lou Dobbs?
Watch it.
This is
Join
good,
me.
Ari.
Take a look.
This is good. I am a pro-immigration Republican. I do not support.
Sound like one
I don't support. Well, maybe you should meet my wife. They're trying.
I think that the point of
Can
all
I
this.
talk?
No,
Okay.
because I think that the larger issue here is the fear mongering. The fear mongering.
Is that on what?
The fear mongering.
There's no fear mongering.
Yes, Matt.
Is there 4,000 people trying to come to our country illegally or not, Allison? Is that fear mongering? Is that true?
I don't know.
You are not open to anything that you don't agree
Then why
with.
am I on your show?
Because you
Why
want
am
the
I here?
platform.
I'm coming on your show because I believe in my heart that if we can't talk to each other, yes, I'm a conservative, but if we can't talk to each other on these platforms, our democracy is doomed. That was fun, huh? All right, that puts me in a good mood. Do you even know that's going on your television sets? I don't know. Are you watching any of that? I mean, we are so overjoyed that you all are here. Would you just look around this room, standing room only, once again? And you know, we're making history right here, right now. As you've seen, we have 3 satellite CPAC sites in Colorado, in California, and in Virginia, because this room is simply not big enough to hold all the people that want to be part of this movement. We have millions of people around the globe who are watching us at this very moment, where, for the first time ever, both a president and a vice president come to CPAC in 3 consecutive years to thank all of you. And why is that? It's really not a secret. You're the heart and soul of this movement. And you all know Mike Pence. In Mike Pence, we have a steady, tested, and committed vice president. Long before Donald Trump saw his value and experience, we all knew his true character. His commitment to conservative principles earned him a nearly perfect congressional voting record with the American Conservative Union. He's a man of deep faith, committed to his family. He's always been in our corner, and we are proud to have his back. And that commitment extends to his exceptional wife, Karen Pence. And we're honored to have her join her husband here today. She's a mom, she's a wife, and she's a teacher. And we love our second lady. Now I'm going to do a small commercial. I hope you've all gotten a copy of our most recent book, Reagan at CPAC. And in that book, the Vice President authors a chapter. The Vice President writes that it was Ronald Reagan who first brought me into the conservative movement 40 years ago. Ronald Reagan is still making an impact on people today. The Vice President goes on to say in this chapter that the smart set in Washington mocked and dismissed Reagan. I guess Reagan might have been the first deplorable. I have to say that I literally thank God that when America's purpose and future hangs in the balance, we have bold leaders like our Vice President. And he honors all of us with his presence. So at this moment, I get the privilege to introduce to you the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, and Karen Pence.
Well, thank you, Matt, and hello, CPAC. It is great for us to be back at CPAC 2019, the largest gathering of conservatives anywhere in America. Thanks for coming out. And I'm honored to be joined here by thousands of conservatives in our nation's capital, but I also want to give a shout out to all those great conservatives watching across this country, especially all of our friends joining us live from Lynchburg, Virginia at Liberty University. I'll see you in May. And to all of them and to all of you, I bring greetings from a friend of mine. A man who restored American leadership at home and abroad, and a man who can't wait to be with you tomorrow. I bring greetings from the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. You know, it's the greatest honor of my life to serve as Vice President to a president who gets up every day and fights to keep the promises that he made to the American people. I mean, think about it. This president promised to get this economy moving again. And working with Republican majorities in the Congress, in our first 2 years, President Trump has cut more federal red tape than any president in American history. We've unleashed American energy, and now the United States is the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world. Under the President's strong leadership, we've forged new trade deals that finally put American jobs and American workers first, and with the support of this generation of conservatives, President Trump signed the largest tax cut and tax reform in American history. That's promises made and promises kept. We cut taxes across the board for working Americans, for American businesses. And we cut out the core of Obamacare. The individual mandate is gone. And the results have been amazing. As I stand before you today, the American economy is booming. In just over 2 years, businesses large and small have created 5.3 million new jobs, including over 480,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs that the other side said would never come back. Unemployment has hit a 50-year low, and more Americans are working today than ever before in the history of this country. The unemployment rate for women has hit a 55-year low, and the unemployment rate for Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, and African Americans has reached the lowest level ever recorded in American history. And the wages of working Americans are rising at a faster pace than they have in more than a decade. Under President Donald Trump, working Americans are winning again. The forgotten men and women of America are forgotten no more. Everywhere you look, confidence is back. Jobs are coming back. In a word, America is back, and we're just getting started. But for all the progress we've made, President Trump has no higher priority than the safety and security of the American people. And from the first days of this administration, this president has worked to make the strongest military in the history of the world stronger still. And last year, President Trump signed the largest investment in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. We're modernizing our nuclear arsenal, updating missile defense, and before the year is out, President Trump will launch the 6th branch of our armed forces, the United States Space Force. Under this Commander-in-Chief, we'll make sure that America is as dominant in space as we are on land and air and sea. So we're rebuilding our military. We're restoring the arsenal of democracy. And we're once again giving our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard the resources they need to accomplish their mission and come home safe. And we're also standing with our veterans and all the men and women who have worn the uniform of the United States. And we restored accountability to the VA. And we're finally giving our heroes access to the world-class health care that they earned in the uniform of the United States. Veterans' choice is here. And in this administration, we're also standing every day with the brave men and women of law enforcement. And we've been giving all those who stand on the thin blue line the resources and the respect that they deserve every single day. And that includes the courageous men and women of Customs and Border Protection who put their lives on the line every single day. Under this president and this administration, we will never abolish ICE. You know, as the president has said many times, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. And since day one of our administration, we've been working to remove dangerous criminals from our streets in record numbers, enforcing our immigration laws and working to secure our border. And we've already started to build that wall. And I'll make you a promise. Before we're done, we're going to build it all. Oh, we're building it. As the president often says, don't worry about it. Make no mistake about it, folks. No matter what you hear from the Democrats and their allies in the media, we have a crisis at our southern border. And it's like nothing we've ever seen before. For the first time ever, the majority of illegal immigrants coming into our country are unaccompanied minors and families. Families that are being exploited by drug cartels and human traffickers, encouraging them to make the long and dangerous journey north at a great financial price and often at a great price to themselves and their safety and well-being. You know, when President Obama in 2014 said we had a humanitarian crisis at our southern border, 120,000 minors and families crossed our border illegally. Last year, there were 145,000. And in the last 4 months alone, more than 120,000 unaccompanied minors and families have been apprehended at our southern border. Now, Democrats want to say it's a manufactured crisis, but the only thing that's manufactured is their outrage. Every day we don't secure our border, we're allowing the crisis to worsen. More lives to be endangered, more people to be exploited, and more drugs to flow into our country. That's why President Trump used his authority under the law to declare a national emergency on our southern border. But now Democrats are trying to stop the president from exercising the authority that the Congress gave him to address this real crisis. So today, we call on every member of Congress, stand up for border security, stop playing politics with the security of the American people, and stand with President Trump for a stronger and safer America. With his renewed commitment to law and order, this president's also been busy seeing to our judicial branch. President Trump has appointed more men and women to our federal courts in the last 2 years than any administration in American history, and they are all conservatives like Justice Neil Gorsuch and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And they're conservatives who will uphold all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution, like the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. You know, the freedom of religion is not just enshrined in our Constitution. It's enshrined in the hearts of the American people. But make no mistake about it, freedom of religion is under attack in our country. Lately, it's actually become fashionable for media elites and Hollywood liberals to mock religious belief. My own family recently came under attack just because my wife, Karen, went back to teach art to children at a Christian school. Let me say before all of you, I couldn't be more proud of my wife. She's a Marine Corps mom. She's a great school teacher, and Karen Pence is a great second lady for the United States of America. But let me be clear on this point. This is not about us. It's about all of you. It's about the sincerely held belief of millions of Americans who cherish their Christian faith and Christian education. And so I'll make you a promise. Under this president and this administration, we will always stand with people of faith. We will always defend the freedom of religion of every American of every faith. So help us God. And as we reflect on our God-given liberties, I got to tell you, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to the most pro-life president in American history. Since the first days of this administration, President Donald Trump has stood without apology for the sanctity of human life. In one of his very first acts, the president reinstated the Mexico City policy preventing taxpayer dollars from funding abortion or abortion providers around the world. And here at home, President Trump signed a law to allow all 50 states to defund Planned Parenthood. Life is winning in America once again. But for all the progress we're making, tragically, at the very moment that more Americans than ever before are embracing the right to life, leading members of the Democratic Party are embracing a radical agenda of abortion on demand. In state legislatures across the country, Democrats have endorsed late-term abortion. The Democrat governor of Virginia openly defends infanticide. And just 4 short days ago, Democrats in the Senate, including every Democratic senator running for president, voted against a bill that would prevent newborn babies who survived failed abortions from being killed. You know, I've long believed that a society can be judged by how it deals with its most vulnerable: the aged, the infirm, the disabled, and the unborn. With Democrats standing for late-term abortion, infanticide, and a culture of death, I promise you, this president, this party, and this movement will always stand for the unborn. We will always defend the inalienable right to life. So we've restored American strength and security at home. And we're doing the same thing around the world. And today, under the leadership of President Trump, the United States of America is once again standing proudly as leader of the free world. Like when this president kept his promise to our most cherished ally and moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the State of Israel. So we've stood with our allies, and we've stood up to our enemies. We've taken the fight to radical Islamic terrorists on our terms, on their soil. In Iraq and Syria, thanks to the courage of our armed forces and our coalition partners, the ISIS caliphate has been decimated, and our troops have liberated 5 million men, women, and children. To see the extraordinary progress they've made in liberating millions from the vicious grip of ISIS, I say with conviction again what has been said throughout history: the armed forces of the United States are the greatest force for good in the history of the world. At this very hour, along the Euphrates River, the last mile of territory where the black flag of ISIS once flew is being captured. And in the wake of these gains, President Trump has announced that the United States will begin to hand the fight off to our partner and bring our troops home. But be assured of this: we will keep a strong presence in the region. We will get our allies to do more in the fight against ISIS, and together we will hunt down and destroy the remnants of ISIS wherever and whenever they rear their ugly head, so they can never threaten our people or our allies again. And with that strong leadership on the world stage, President Trump has also confronted the greatest threat to peace and security in the Middle East when he withdrew the United States of America from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Iran supports terrorist proxies, fuels conflicts in the region, plots terrorist attacks on European soil, and openly advocates the destruction of the State of Israel. 2 weeks ago, Karen and I stood and prayed at the Auschwitz-Birkenau Nazi death camp in Poland. The history of that time must never be forgotten. We mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. But we say from our heart, never again. As we stood in that place, I thought, when authoritarian regimes breathe out vile anti-Semitic hatred and threats of violence, history teaches we must take them at their word. Anti-Semitism is not just wrong, it's evil. Anti-Semitism must be confronted wherever and whenever it arises, and it must be universally condemned. The Iranian regime openly advocates another Holocaust and seeks the means to achieve it. But I can assure you, under President Donald Trump's leadership, America will continue to stand strong. We will continue to oppose Iran, its malign influence, and I promise you, under this president, America will never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. So as the world has witnessed over the last 2 years, under this president, the United States will continue to seek every opportunity to achieve peace, even as we stand strong on the world stage. We'll approach every challenge with our eyes wide open. President Trump deals with the world as it is, not as we wish it would be. And the truth is that effort for peace been nowhere more evident than in the progress that we've made in the Indo-Pacific over the last 2 years. It's remarkable to think that when I stood at this podium 2 years ago, North Korea was engaged in regular nuclear tests, launching missiles over Japan, threatening the United States and our allies. Faced with this threat, President Trump rallied the world around an unprecedented pressure campaign, and the world has witnessed the results. No more nuclear tests. No more missiles being fired. Our hostages are home, and Karen and I had the privilege to be present in Hawaii as the remains of our fallen Korean War heroes began to be returned to American soil. Thanks to President Donald Trump, our boys are finally coming home. Now, last night, President Trump returned from a second historic summit with North Korea in Vietnam. As the president said, it was a productive 2 days, and discussions among teams will continue. But as President Trump said as he departed, sometimes you have to walk. And I can assure you, after decades of failure with North Korea, Under President Trump's leadership, America will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We will keep seeking peace. But for the sake of our security, the sake of the people of the Korean Peninsula, President Trump will stand firm until we achieve the complete denuclearization of North Korea. So in just 2 years under this president's leadership, from the world stage to here at home, just in case you haven't noticed, America is winning again. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not getting tired of it. But to keep on winning, my fellow conservatives, we have a choice to make in the next 20 months. Will we re-elect a president who's making America great again for 4 more years? Or will we let the Democrats take America on a hard left turn and lose all the gains that we fought so hard to make? There you go. You know, America was founded on a simple idea. And that idea is freedom. But over my lifetime, the support for liberty, a strong national defense, free enterprise, inalienable rights has principally fallen to our party and to this movement. Today, Democrats openly advocate an economic system that has impoverished millions of people around the world. Under the guise of Medicare for all and a Green New Deal, Democrats are embracing the same tired economic theories that have impoverished nations and stifled the liberties of millions over the past century. That system is socialism. Remarkably, a leading candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination is an avowed socialist. But it's not just him. Bernie's been joined by a chorus of candidates and newly elected officials who have papered over the failed policies of socialism with bumper sticker slogans and slick social media campaigns. But what they're actually offering is just more of the same. More taxes, more spending, more government, and less freedom. It was freedom, not socialism, that gave us the most prosperous economy in the history of the world. It was freedom, not socialism, that ended slavery, won 2 world wars, and stands today as the beacon of hope for all the world. It was freedom, not socialism, that's moving us beyond the prejudices of the past to create a more perfect union and extend the blessings of liberty to every American, regardless of race or creed or color. It was freedom. And it was freedom, not socialism, that gave us the highest quality of life, the cleanest environment on earth, and improved the health and well-being of millions around the world. It was freedom. What Medicare for all really means is quality health care for none. The only thing green about the so-called Green New Deal is how much green it's going to cost taxpayers if these people ever pass it into law. You know, Margaret Thatcher probably said it best. The trouble with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. The truth is, we want to make poor people richer. They want to make rich people poorer. We want to make poverty more rare. They want to make poverty more comfortable. That's a choice we face today, men and women, between freedom and socialism, between personal responsibility and government dependence. Where freedom encourages investment, socialism stifles growth. Where freedom welcomes diversity, socialism demands conformity. And as President Trump said in his State of the Union address, America was founded on liberty and independence and not government coercion, domination, and control. The moment America becomes a socialist country is the moment that America ceases to be America. And as the President said 24 days ago, so we must say with one voice, America will never be a socialist country. We know where socialism leads. You want socialism? Just look at Venezuela. Venezuela was once one of the richest and most vibrant democracies in the Western Hemisphere, but under Maduro's socialist rule, it's become one of the poorest and most despotic. Today, more than 9 out of 10 people live in poverty in that once rich country. More than 3 million Venezuelans have abandoned their homes and fled the brutality of the Maduro regime. But the struggle in Venezuela is between dictatorship and democracy. The struggle in Venezuela is between socialism and freedom. And as I told world leaders in Colombia just this week, Nicolas Maduro is a dictator with no legitimate claim to power, and Nicolas Maduro must go. The truth is, Venezuela needs what America has. Venezuela needs freedom. Freedom is about enabling people to live their lives as they see fit, not government control. Freedom produces more and better goods than any system in any other place and time in American world history. Freedom is more generous, more helpful, and more humane than any other social or economic model ever attempted, because it's the only philosophy that respects the dignity and worth of every single life and sees every man, woman, and child as made in the image of God. That's freedom. That's our heritage. And freedom works. This is what we believe. This is who we are. But this is the choice we face in the next 20 months. So men and women of CPAC, we got work to do. I came here to say thanks. To look back over the shoulder and make sure you knew just how much we've accomplished with this president and with your support in just 2 short years. But now we have more work to do. But now we have more work to do. Just as we did in 2016, 20 months from now, the American people are going to face a choice once again. You know, 2 years ago in Poland, President Trump declared, and I quote, "The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive." As we gather here today, we must ask our movement the same question. As the president went on to say that day, in his words, do we have the confidence in our values to defend them? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization? Looking out across this room, looking out across this great movement, I know we do. We have the strength, we have the determination, we have the courage to stand for freedom. Because I have faith faith in the American people, that if we go out and speak freedom to the people of this nation every day in the next 20 months, that if we lay out a vision for a boundless American future based on timeless American principles, if we lay out a choice between freedom and socialism, the American people will choose freedom every single time. The President and I both know that if we hold the banner of freedom high, if we put into practice those words of Scripture inscribed on the Liberty Bell, to proclaim liberty throughout all the land and unto all the inhabitants thereof, the American people will rally to our cause once again. We will keep on winning. We will keep on growing, and we will preserve freedom for this generation and the next. So as you go from this place, go with confidence. Confidence that you have a president that's fighting every day for the ideals and the values that are at the heart of American greatness. Confidence in the goodness of the American people, the rightness of our cause. And confidence that if we ask for the blessings of Him who established this miracle of democracy on these wilderness shores so long ago, that we cannot fail. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. So freedom always wins. So men and women of CPAC, it is great to be with you today. The time's a-wasting. We've got work to do. But I leave here with renewed confidence that if all of us do all that we can between now and November of 2020 to hold up freedom, to protect our people, to defend our values, and with President Donald Trump in the White House, with more conservatives elected to our nation's capital and to state houses across this nation, and with God's help, we will make America safe again. We will make America more prosperous than ever before. And to borrow a phrase from a friend of mine, we will make America great again. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
And the Vice President has left the building. That was Vice President Mike Pence giving a speech here at CPAC, the Conservative Action Political Conference, where the great conservative minds come. Hello, I'm Brian Wilson, your host here on JWTV, as we bring you coverage of CPAC 2019. It is going to be a time here today where we talk to people here in the booth, and occasionally we'll go back to the floor to hear other comments from some of the big thought leaders of the conservative movement. Right now, I'm joined by Vince Colonnese with the Daily Caller, our first guest of the day. Vince, good morning to you. Good
It's nice to see you, Brian.
We're getting close to the noontime
That's
hour
right.
here. The Vice President coming here is always an important thing, and it's not easy when he comes to move around the hall because there is an intense security, something you and I experienced together this morning.
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, there's a lot going on here. I mean, if you think about it, actually, it's not just the Vice President of the United States, it's all of the very interested conservatives who are here to see him, to be a part of CPAC. Certainly a lot of the people that we see, that you've been speaking with right here on Judicial Watch's programming. And I think it's it has become the epicenter, it always is, CPAC, the epicenter of the conservative universe. So as a result, they think, security really matters here, especially this morning, especially tomorrow as the president arrives. And they want to keep people safe in a world where Antifa is like all over the place and chasing people out of workplaces and harassing them at their homes, things like that. So security actually matters. I mean, you have to go through this dance to get in here, but it's totally worth it to be with a lot of great people.
I have a lot of respect for the Secret Service people, but they are largely devoid of a sense of humor. We have to agree on that.
Yeah, no. And you tried a lot of jokes on them this morning.
And nothing
just
worked.
Didn't work.
It did not work at all. Vince, tell me a little bit about what the Daily Caller's been focusing on lately. I mean, listen, for my money, people like Chuck Ross, a lot of your really top flight people are doing great investigative work, and I don't see the stories on the Daily Caller being walked back. Your tradition is very strong of getting it right. I look at other social media platforms that cover news around the country, BuzzFeed, and you find a lot of those stories are being walked back. So what are you doing that's right?
The difference is that we're not credulous and we're not sucking up to power. I mean, really, so, it's kind of a weird scenario we have where the president of the United States is a Republican, and then the media acts like they're speaking truth to power. Oh, they're being very skeptical of power. No, they're not. Think about this. And Judicial Watch has been so good on this issue. But you have the deep state or the administrative state or basically the institutional people of government that we don't elect, who wield extraordinary amounts of power and then speak behind the scenes to the liberal press, and the liberal press sort of gulps it up. It's very credulous. They sort of just instinctively run with it. So when you see BuzzFeed, which you just referred to, running with a report that the president directly ordered Michael Cohen to lie to Congress, and then Mueller comes out and spikes that and says that's not even true.
Yeah.
That's because they've developed this habit of being way too credulous when they accept stories from powerful people in order to take down a political opponent. And what the Daily Caller has done that's different is that we're skeptical. We've always been skeptical. We're skeptical of President Obama. We're skeptical of anybody who's in government. We're skeptical of people who have power. And we keep asking the question, what's really going on here? And that's why now we've gotten the umpteenth explanation from Michael Cohen this week where he's like, hey, you know what? No collusion. It's not a surprise to us.
Right.
We've been deeply skeptical on this question for so long, and we've continued to tug on each of those threads, and we keep coming up with the same answer.
Michael Cohen's testimony, many of the mainstream news outlets came up with it was damaging to the president. I don't know, maybe it's because I look at it from a different perspective, but what I saw was there's no there. And he confirmed that pretty much.
Yeah, and in a variety of ways. He was never in Prague. He was never in the Czech Republic. That was central to the Hillary Clinton orchestrated dossier, which was at the beginning of all this, that Michael Cohen was the colluder. He wasn't if he wasn't in Prague. He wasn't if the fundamental element of the dossier is not true. What was the big one? Oh, the P tape. Yeah. Remember? Oh, this tape. They've got compromat on Donald Trump. No, they don't. Michael Cohen's like, yeah, I would know if that there's nothing like that. There is nothing like that. And then he, of course, said the most important thing, there's no direct evidence of collusion. And you'd think the press would reflect on that, but there's a reason that they're not, in mostly, and it's because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to admit that you've spent the last 2 years feeding the American public a lie and continuing to tell them the answer is just around the corner. Right. The resolution to this is just around the corner. I promise you we'll find collusion. And it keeps on getting more and more embarrassing. So what does the media do? It uses the single most powerful thing it has, omission. It ignores.
The power to ignore.
That's right. It ignores that this is happening. And that's what we call selection bias. And in this case, it's bias by omission.
Right. And a lot of that happens. Well, we're going to tell you this story, and we're going to leave out pertinent facts that would bring balance to the piece.
Sure.
Yeah, it happens a lot. It really does. So the success of the Daily Caller has to do a lot with your investigative reporting, the consistency of the reporting, and pictures of supermodels. For some reason, I don't quite understand.
People love it. I can't explain it either, but they love it.
Yeah. So what are you working on right now over there?
A lot of digging into that. A lot of digging into college campuses. Basically, all of the fundamental parts of the left and how they operate. Certainly, all of these cultural battles. You look at abortion politics in Virginia and New York. You look at the race hoaxes that we keep getting, where they're foisted upon us, that are like meant to demonstrate somehow that America is fundamentally bigoted, when it keeps on coming up, actually, no, it's not. It's actually composed of fundamentally good people, and you have a bunch of people who are trying to create divisions among us. So this is the kind of stuff we're constantly looking at. And if I can, I'd like to plug one thing. Actually, two things. Which is, if you're dissatisfied with the offering that the press gives you, you need to be a part of the solution. It's not just the Daily Caller and Judicial Watch and all these great organizations actually creating content like this, where we do have real conversations about what's really going on. It's you sharing it. It's you actually getting it out to an audience of your friends and your family and letting them know this exists. Because it's hard to break through sort of the corporate barriers unless you get a groundswell of people who can help do that. So that's why you're watching this probably on a social media somewhere where you see Judicial Watch. Follow Judicial Watch everywhere they possibly have a product. Go to Facebook and actually follow the page if you've just incidentally run into this. The same is true of the Daily Caller. Do that and then share it. Because if you want to actually change the country for the better, get back to that thing that President Trump talks about, make America great again, you've got to be a part of the solution. Everyone's always says, what can I do? That's the prescription.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Let's talk very briefly about the immigration battle that's going on right now.
Yeah.
President declaration of an emergency. And still there's a lot of discussion out there right now about whether or not the Senate is going to send him a measure that will disapprove of his emergency action. Quick summation on that.
Well, in the end, you may very well get Congress sending a resolution of disapproval. The irony of this is, of course, that Congress gave the president the power in the first place to do this. The Emergencies Act of 1976 is where Congress said, you know what, we're not going to make this our responsibility. We're going to hand this to the executive. And President Trump decided he was going to use that power given to him by Congress. Congress would like to make this a check now on a power they've already given him.
Right.
But the president's got the veto. That's how it works. And he's already said, I'm going to veto that thing, and I'm going to keep considering this a crisis.
Vince Colonnese is our special guest here on JWTV as we discuss the big issues of the day here on our little live broadcast here, covered on social media platforms all over the country. Hundreds and thousands of people who are watching right now via social media platforms like Facebook, on Instagram, etc. We really appreciate you joining us here to talk about the issues of the day. Now, I'm Brian Wilson. I'm a radio host out of Nashville, Tennessee, WTN Radio. You can follow me if you'd like on Twitter at BrianWilson997. I'd love to have you follow me. What we do here is that in between guests, they zoom the camera in on me, and I tap dance for a little moment, and then we widen the shot out. And what you're going to find is, if by magic, a new person has arrived here at the table.
Amazing.
In this particular case, it's the big man. You know him, you love him, you can't live without him. Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch.
Good to be with you,
It's good to be with you, my old friend. It's good to see you.
I've known Brian for longer than I care to admit to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You were on the main stage in there. What was the thrust of what you were saying earlier today?
We were talking about the current crisis. There's a national emergency on the border, and there's a national emergency up here in Washington, which is this outrageous effort to overthrow the president. And the rule of law is being cast aside. The president's being victimized. I know it's hard to call the president a victim, but he really is. And if he were a regular citizen, frankly, he'd probably be suing the heck out of everybody. And the violations of law to get him, to me, are just a real threat, not only individually to him in terms of an outrage, but a threat to the rule of law and the republic.
Pull that microphone just a little closer.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, absolutely, you're right. What I love about Judicial Watch is that you guys...
Do I have to start over again?
No, you're fine. You're like a dog with a bone. You get a hold of it and you never want to let go. You haven't given up on Benghazi. You haven't given up on the email situation with Hillary Clinton. You continue to investigate various parts of the Russian collusion. You keep going until you get all of the answers that you want. It's a never-ending quest sometimes.
You know, it's funny. The left is tearing down statues all over America of 19th century politicians, but we're not allowed to ask questions about what Hillary Clinton did 2 years ago.
Right.
My gosh. And of course, Hillary Clinton is the guiding force. Her operatives, we saw that during the Cohen hearings this week with Lanny Davis providing free legal advice. Lanny Davis is one of Hillary Clinton's closest associates, a longtime aide to her and political, legal aide to her as well. And it's not just Judicial Watch. The courts have questions. You know, one of the reasons we're still in court on the Clinton email issue, and that we'll be taking witness testimony over the next few months from top Clinton officials from the State Department days and even her personal lawyer, is because the court wants to know, was her system set up to thwart the transparency law? Was the court hoodwinked when they were telling us to shut it down, when in fact they knew there were emails out there? And where are all the emails? We still don't have all of Hillary Clinton's emails.
No, we don't.
The FBI was only able to recover, of course Judicial Watch has found this out, 5,000 or so of the 33,000 that she deleted. The court wants to know, well, is there another way of finding where those other emails are? And that's what Judicial Watch is doing, all this basic investigative work, thanks to a federal court judge who isn't going to be cowed by the silly political argument, well, Hillary Clinton isn't running for president, therefore she should be immune from the consequences of any illicit action.
So right now with the Mueller report out, what's your sense about that? What kind of things is Judicial Watch interested in as that report makes its way to Attorney General William Barr? And we may hear a little bit about it, or we may hear nothing about it.
Well, and you're assuming there's a report coming out. I don't know if that's the case.
Maybe, you may be right.
Who knows? Maybe, I would presume the Attorney General wants an update. Maybe there'll be an interim report. I don't personally see a report being done at this time, and I would object to one. We already have a dossier. We don't need another one. Certainly not one out of the Justice Department. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. So I would hope the Attorney General would make that clear. But what the report is not going to cover are the abuses of the rule of law. They're not going to talk about the coup attempt, the improper invocation of the 25th Amendment, the desire to wear a wire. Mueller isn't going to fess up to using abusive FISA warrants to spy on the Trump team. Remember, one of those FISA warrants that is so at issue was to the benefit of the Mueller operation, signed off by Rod Rosenstein after Mueller was appointed. So we're not going to get an expose of the corruption behind the illicit targeting of Trump out of the Mueller report, and this is why our work, independent, and our lawsuits to try to get that information are so essential.
What are we to make about Andrew McCabe? Maybe a better question is, what are we supposed to make of Andrew McCabe and his version of events versus Rod Rosenstein and his version of events? Who are we to believe in that particular case?
Well, Rod Rosenstein necessarily, we haven't heard from Rod Rosenstein on his version of events. So I don't know if they're at odds. The Justice Department for Mr. Rosenstein evidently issued a statement in response to what McCabe said, and it was full of weasel words and loopholes that you could drive trucks through. So you're just highlighting the failure of investigators in Congress to get to the bottom of what went on. McCabe's being interviewed by 60 Minutes. Why isn't he being interviewed by Congress? Why hasn't Rosenstein been interviewed? And there are three things that I think are important that went on. It tells you probably why it's not going to happen, by at least from the official bodies. What was under discussion? The lawless invocation of the 25th Amendment. They don't think it was lawless, but it was. The decision, the debate whether to wear a wire on the president.
Unbelievable.
And
really.
What was the third thing they were talking about? How to get a special counsel appointed.
Right.
So out of these coup discussions flowed the appointment of Robert Mueller.
Right.
And it doesn't mean Mueller was involved in it initially, but now we know that's where his operation, how it was formed, it was corruptly formed.
Judicial Watch does good work, and it's only possible to continue doing this kind of work because of the support of people who are out there watching this broadcast right now. Talk about the importance and how you continue to be able to do that because of such support.
Well, because, my job, I have one of the great jobs in Washington, D.C. I get to do this work, and I don't have to worry about the support of the American people. Obviously, we're always asking for money, but I know people are supporting our work. We have over 700,000 active supporters. And Brian, that makes us one of the most significant grassroots groups in the country. And that makes my job and our lives at Judicial Watch so much easier, because it means that we can go to court, we can do all the work that we need to do to get the job done. It's just a matter of how many hours in the day do we have to get it done, because we know the support's out there. And frankly, if you're not supporting our cause, you really should, both financially, prayerfully, and finding out what we're doing and educating yourself and your fellow Americans about this. Because, this effort to overthrow the president, it's not about President Trump personally. In some ways, from his enemies it is. They don't like him, so they want to throw him out. It's about protecting our republic, because this president is the victim now, and maybe a future president of either party that's victimized in the future, and we could lose our republic just like that, because you've got bureaucrats who decide they don't like him or her, and they're going to remove him and abuse power to remove him and hinder him unlawfully. It's a dangerous threat to our republic.
And if it weren't for Judicial Watch in there every day, asking the questions, knocking on the door, filing the FOIA reports, and requesting information from the government, I'm still shocked and stunned and amazed that Congress can't get the stuff that you get on a routine basis.
Yeah, it's not for want of authority and power. It's for want of ambition and leadership. They don't want to do it.
Isn't it interesting that an administration will ignore a request for information from Congress, which is supposed to have some oversight over the executive branch, but they are frightened to death of a judge down at the district court.
Right.
It gets their attention, doesn't it?
Well, that's why Judicial Watch is so successful, relatively speaking, to Congress. When you have a document dispute between Congress and the presidency, it's a political dispute. You know, there are lawyers involved, but there are politicians fighting each other for information, and it's constitutional. You got this long-running battle between the executive branch and the legislative branch that the Constitution is designed to actually happen. But when we're in court, it's the judge adjudicating it, and it's not politics. As best as it can be eliminated.
You've always got something burbling right beneath the surface, something that's about to happen. And I always like to ask you when I have the chance to get you, and you might want to share this with the audience, what things should we be watching closely in the days ahead?
Well, we have discovery in the Clinton email case, so we'll have testimony. We have new Clinton emails that will be coming out. And we also have documents about that conspiracy to take out President Trump, specifically documents related to Bruce Orr, the FBI, the DOJ official who his wife worked at Fusion GPS, who was hired by the Fitton firm. So those documents will be coming out too. So it's never ending in terms of the quest to get the information.
Well, keep doing the good work. And Tom, thank you very much for the opportunity to work with your organization. I think the world of you guys.
Thank you, Brian.
And it's been a real joy to be here on your JWTV, talking to all of your followers on social media platforms.
Well, we're lucky to have you and to benefit from your great experience.
Well, thank you very much. Good to see you. Hi, I'm Brian Wilson. I am your host today on JWTV as we broadcast live from CPAC 2019. This is the place where conservatives come from all over the country to talk about the big issues of our day. We heard earlier today, if you were listening, from what was going on the floor with Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, and what he had to say. You've heard from Vince Colonnese and also from Tom Fitton, the President of Judicial Watch, about the things they have going on right now and the preparations that they make on a daily basis to get those documents from government so that we can know exactly what our government is up to. Thank goodness for the people at Judicial Watch and the work that they do. We are going to be bringing you newsmaker interviews throughout this time, and so we're now going to turn to one of my favorite people in Washington, someone that I've known, I think, almost since the day I came to Washington, Victoria Tunsing with Geneva and Tunsing, one of the top lawyers in this town. Victoria, it's good to see you.
Oh, it's so fun to be here with you.
I'm going to move this microphone really nice and close.
There we are.
So tell me a little bit. We were having a conversation the other day in preparation for your appearance here, Victoria. You make the observation that a lot of things that have been going on, a lot of people who are pleading guilty as part of the Mueller investigation, in your opinion, they're pleading guilty to things that really aren't crimes. Isn't that weird?
It's very strange. George Papadopoulos, I'm calling him George Papadope, because why would you lie to the FBI about when you met with some Russians? Because it was perfectly legal for him to meet with the Russians. So, they got him on. It was the wrong date. Mike Flynn. Do you know what the special counsel told the court regarding Mike Flynn's statement? They had the transcript of what the conversation between Flynn and Kislyak.
Right.
And they told the court that because Flynn didn't tell everything that went on in the conversation, it impeded justice. The government had the transcript. It was a lie. They lied to the court.
They knew full well.
They knew full well what he talked about.
Now, in many situations, stop you right there, because in many situations like that, when you're being deposed and you're trying to elicit information from a witness and you say, what happened, and he gives you what he remembers, but maybe you have a document that has more information in it, isn't it standard practice to say, well, did you ask him about X? Does this transcript that we have of your conversation refresh your memory on that?
Yeah,
but that's not what they wanted. They wanted to get something that tripped him up
even more
so they could claim perjury.
Even more importantly, Brian, you said when you're being deposed. He was not being deposed.
Well, that's right,
people,
yeah.
It's like these people had walked in and talked to him about other matters on many occasions. So they come in and say, they don't say, hey, this is an important thing and we want you to know that if you don't tell us the truth, you've got a problem. They didn't say that. They just said, hey, we want to talk to you about your conversation with Kislyak. One interview. He doesn't remember some things, and now he had to plead guilty.
Let's talk about Michael Cohen. He has pled guilty to certain things. He made a big deal about this $35,000 check that was signed by Donald Trump that was supposed to be a reimbursement to Stormy Daniels. I know you have very strong feelings about that whole thing. Give me your thoughts.
Well, first of all, that incident, and he pled guilty to that conduct in the Southern District of New York, but that's not why he pled guilty. It was not a crime, what he did, and I'll get to that in just one second. He did actually evade income taxes to the tune of over $1 million. He did make false statements to banks, and that's a major issue. He did a silly thing about lying to Congress, and I'll come back to that. But this thing about Stormy Daniels, it's absolutely proper to have a legal settlement during the course of a campaign. It's proper conduct. People do it all the time. People make these legal settlements with NDAs, non-disclosure agreements.
Let's talk about NDAs. They come under a lot of criticism, but oftentimes, okay, somebody says, I got an issue with something you did in the past. You say, I disagree with your assessment of it all. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But I want this to just go away.
I want it.
It's a pain in my butt, and I really want to get it over with. So you sign an agreement, neither side accepting responsibility or admitting any guilt, but it resolves the matter. Except in this particular case, it didn't stay secret. It got disclosed.
She violated it by coming out and talking about it. But the former chairman of the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, has been on, well, of course only Fox, because no other station or channel will have him, saying that it was perfectly legal what went on with the payment to Stormy Daniels. So this check, yeah, that's a check. Do you sign a check if it's a crime? I mean, Donald Trump is not stupid.
Yeah.
If he's committing a crime, doing something that's wrong.
I think Lindsey Graham has said it's not very often that somebody writes a check if they think what they're doing is illegal. You wouldn't do that.
But here's another important thing about that election law. You have to, the person who does the wrong, who commits the crime, has to really know specifically that that's against the election law, because it prohibits certain things that are legal all the time, and it just does it in a certain way. And Michael Cohen, he can't tell you what's in the Second Amendment. You know that. He's much less be able to tell you what's in the arcane section of the federal election law. So he had no idea it was illegal. He did it just to embarrass Trump.
You and your husband, who are partners in love and law.
Very much in love.
Yeah, that's right. Joe DeGeneva is his name. Are often contrarian voices in this town. You see things so differently and with such clarity than what we often hear in the mainstream report. I would imagine that that's frustrating at times when everybody is saying this is what happened and this is what it means, and you look at it and say, that's not at all what it means.
I go crazy. Look at this Washington Post. This is what we have to live with here. You got out of here. It says from yesterday, Cohen paints Trump as crooked, and then repeats he's a racist, he's a con man, and he's a cheat. This is what we live with here in the swamp. This rag of a newspaper that nobody does any analytical thinking.
But the real headline out of this should have been that Michael Cohen basically killed off any further discussion of Russian collusion.
Yes.
His testimony, he admitted he'd never been to Prague, and he had no direct evidence of Russian collusion.
That's just suspicions, which is never allowed. But it also is the fact that Michael Cohen said Donald Trump just thought this was a big PR stunt. He really didn't think he was going to win the election, and he said, hey, I'm really going to get a lot of PR out of this. But then Cohen said he would do anything, quote unquote, do anything to get elected. Now, that seems kind of internally inconsistent. The other thing that I wanted to get back to, this thing about the Russia, because if you don't know the law, you don't know this. There was nothing wrong. There was no reason for Michael Cohen to say the negotiations for a Trump project in Russia stopped in March, when, oh my goodness, they really went to June. And he told us all that he was protecting the president by saying that Donald Trump could have been negotiating for a project in Russia up till election day.
And that would have been fine.
Would be no big deal. And he actually could have done it up until he was inaugurated, but that would be kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Get elected.
All right, good deal. So we're okay. We want to thank you so much, Victoria Tunsing, for joining us here. It is always a pleasure to catch up with you, and great to see you, my old friend.
Good, thanks.
Talk to you later.
Brian.
So I'm Brian Wilson. I'm your host today here on JWTV as we continue to talk about the things that are on conservatives' mind from CPAC 2019. CPAC 2019, the place where conservatives come. Very busy place today. Very tight security today because the vice president is here. By the way, the president will be here speaking to these conservatives tomorrow. We continue our conversation. Neil McCabe, who is with One America News. Hello, how are you, Neil? It's good to see you.
Fantastic.
Tell me a little about One America News and what you do.
All right, so I'm a political reporter, but I also do some of the deeper dive investigative pieces for One America News. We're in about 35 million homes now. We just completed our 5th year.
Wow.
We're based in San Diego, but I'm at the DC Bureau, which is right on Capitol Hill.
And so what kind of stories are you pursuing right now?
Actually, I'm looking at the whip count for the national emergency vote in the Senate. And by whip count, I'm actually counting the whips, because you have the Senate whip, John Thune, is going to oppose it. And then you have guys like Todd Young, who's the chairman of the Senate Republican Committee. He'll probably oppose it. Mitt Romney is a deputy whip. He'll probably oppose it. I'm looking at Tim Scott and others. So you have about 13 of these deputy whips. So basically, of the whip structure, whips are the people who are supposed to collect the votes and make sure the Republican Party wins. But you have, of the 13, 14 people in the whip team, there's probably 5 or 6 of them who are actually going to be voting against the president.
Let's give people a little background on this, because it's an interesting story. The president declares there's an emergency on the border, I'm going to spend money. The Democratic House, they take action and say, we're going to put forth a privileged resolution that would take away that emergency declaration.
Right.
It passes because the Democrats control the House. It goes to the Senate. You would expect that the Senate might be supportive of the president.
You'd think.
But it's a very close question, and there are, we got Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, you got who else? Tom Tillis, and as you say,
Tom Tillis is a deputy whip also.
Maybe others who may be voting against the president and with the Democrats to strip the president of the emergency authority. Now, long term, if the president vetoes, they probably don't have the votes to override a veto.
Correct, that's correct.
But in the short term, you have Republicans that are actually going to vote with Democrats against the president regarding border security. Who are the names to watch? You gave us some. What about, for example, some people said the 4th vote could be Lamar Alexander of Tennessee.
Yeah, that's also very interesting. And so there's going to be Lamar Alexander is sort of retiring, and so that's going to be an open seat. So he's
free vote for him.
Right. But what I'm focusing on for what's going on with the Republican leadership, 2 things. One, the new head of the Republican Governors Association is Larry Hogan of Maryland. So you have a guy who's the head of the Republican Governors Association is thinking of primarying, running against the president for the nomination. So you have the Republican leadership that still is opposed to the president. And what I'm looking at for this emergency vote is this is sort of a test. People say, sure, the House could vote to impeach, but the Senate would block it. Well, maybe not. This is sort of a test. How much support is there for Republicans who are willing to cross the president? And it's sort of like a gauge of that support for me.
All right. What other things you might find interesting right now?
Well, I'm really focused on that and the border. It's it's like the need to build that wall. The president said in every rally, I went to 15, 20 rallies during the 2016 campaign. The biggest applause line there was the wall. And it's just inconceivable that the president could promise to build a wall. He could get all these people in office and they won't give him a wall.
Yeah, it has really been a heck of a battle. And a lot of people were surprised the president went ahead and declared there's an argument to be made that he could do a lot of this without the emergency declaration. What's your sense of that?
Well, it's there. And the problem that you run into is that there are still so many people in the administration who actually are not in favor of the president's agenda. Mattis, of course, was fighting the president for 2 years. Mattis was kneecapping the president, leaking against the president. Mattis people are still in the Pentagon. So every time he tries to do something with, say, the Pentagon, you're going to get those leaks and those stories on the front page of USA Today or whatnot. And so I think the big story is can the president take control of his own administration as he goes into the last half of his first term.
Neil McCabe with One America News.
One America News.
It is good to meet you,
and
thank you very much for joining us here on JWTV. Listen, we need to, because of the technical requirements of our social media platforms, we need to drop down for a little bit. We're going to take a little break, but stay right where you are. We'll be back very, very soon.